Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting for 10:30 this morning. We have two items on our agenda. One is the Noble and Taylor Merchants Association updates, so we can actually move it over to Bill. And also zoning with our Director of Planning and Development as well to go through the zoning, and Karen, correct? Okay, so let's go with, excuse me, everyone, I'm wearing a mask. I had oral surgery yesterday, so I was out, and hate to say it, I have to have another oral surgery tomorrow. So I'm just trying to keep the air out of it because the nerves are open.
Sorry.
So we're gonna go with the roll call. I'm chair of the Planning and Development Committee. Vice Chair, Councilman Cobb.
Here.
Councilman Sheets is the new member to the Planning and Development, and I believe she is not able to be here today due to staffing issues at work. Okay, so we're gonna move forward, and since we're gonna start with the Taylor Merchants Association, I did ask for Bill Hanna to be here just for the Taylor, for the Noble and Taylor Merchants Association. So if there was any last minute things that need to be added into the contract, we were aware of it and knew about it. And just for him to make sure that everything that we're gonna do with the Taylor, if he had any questions, we can move that forward as well. But I just got off the phone with him, and says once we go through all this, I can, once you approve everything, we can send it to him. Great, so I'm gonna turn it over to Myra, who is director, well, not director, but who is helping with the Merchants Association on Taylor. So I'll turn it
Actually,
over
they
to
have elected me executive director.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was trying to close.
So Jackie, you more than welcome to consider that.
You know
I know you don't
I
like.
like to be.
Okay,
So-
all right, all right.
Okay.
So I'm turning it over to you. So you have 11:45, we're gonna start into the zoning. So up until 11:45.
Great.
Up to you, and then the council members, whoever have questions.
Great. So I put together a PowerPoint and I'll just run through this pretty quickly for you. We are doing a merchants association. And so what's covered in this PowerPoint is exactly what is a merchants association, defining what Taylor is, and just so I'm clear, Taylor is what the Taylor Merchants Association, known as the Taylor Road Merchants Association, wants to be known as. We'll go through the demographics, what the vision is, and what we're asking in the budget from the city. So for those not familiar with what a merchants association is, it's basically a group of businesses that get together and they have a common cause, and that could be the business conditions, legislation, marketing, promotions. And in our case, we are doing a 501c3. Some merchants associations, typically with malls, are a 501c6. So here are our goals. There are about 80 merchants on Taylor, and the proposal that we're looking at involves beautification, marketing, and promotion. And right now, for those familiar with Taylor, and obviously almost everybody in this room is because of the location of City Hall, Taylor has become pretty much a drive-through street where people aren't walking, there's no biking. It's not really consumer friendly at this point. It's just a place that you drive through to get to another place. So we want to change that. What we've recognized is, and we being the merchants who are on the board and the executive board, we've identified this as an interesting situation because there are so many different ethnic groups on Taylor that aren't recognized that we think that there's an international flavor that's been overlooked. So we want to promote that. And also at the northern end of Taylor, and it's the northern end of South Taylor to be clear, the Orthodox Jewish population is growing at a rapid rate, and it's become recognized as insular, even though that isn't really the intention of that Orthodox community. And so we'd like to educate the public about what is happening over there, and also to increase the business that's happening with the Orthodox Jewish population in their stores and opening it up to the public and having more of a welcoming feel so that everybody knows that it's not just a group that is in that community. So we've defined the boundaries, and Taylor's an interesting situation because in between Taylor, almost splitting it in half, is Kane Park. which would not be part of the Merchants Association. And also the school that's there, which is part of Cleveland Heights University Heights school system, also not part of what we're talking about. The other thing that's unusual about Taylor is that on the south part of Taylor, on the other side of Cedar, where it intersects Cedar, is all University Heights. And so we're also not talking at this juncture anyway about involving University Heights in this conversation. We feel that the conversation is complex enough right now without getting another city involved, especially under the circumstances where 2 new mayors are entering into the scene as of 2026. So these are the boundaries, and I know it's not going to make a lot of sense because of these streets, the street numbers, but basically what we're looking at is everything from Hebrew Academy to Meadowbrook, pretty much, and also on Cedar from Bremick to the corner of Taylor, and also from Wood Trader to the corner of Taylor. So as I mentioned, if you look at number 5, it does not include those parcels in University Heights, Kane Park, or the school. So we feel that South Taylor's never reached its potential. So there's never really been a beautification program. If there was one, it was with the previous Merchants Association, which money was collected independently, and that didn't really last a long time. We want to present Taylor as a go-to destination, and as part of that, we are going to snowplow sidewalks. We want to begin promotions, and it's an interesting dynamic with Taylor because we want to do umbrella promotions. In fact, one of the things that we're talking about right now is doing a promotion with all different sized trucks, which we think will attract families because kids love trucks, that they'd be able to get on, and it would be everything from semi-trucks to fire engines. But we also want to enhance that with a reading component so that we would have people from the departments in Cleveland Heights and hopefully from the media reading books about those specific trucks. So we want to have an event that would be of interest to everybody on Taylor from one end to the other. But in addition to that, in addition to the umbrella programs, we also want to do specific programs because, as I mentioned or referenced previously, the Orthodox community has a lot of programs that nobody is aware of and that we think could be fun for everyone in the community. So we want to make those known to everyone. We think that we should be promoting diversity much more than we are now. And also, we're not taking advantage of Kane Park. In another city where there was a sledding hill, there would be pop-up merchants or scarf vendors or hot chocolate vendors or any of those kind of things to make it more of a fun place than just a sledding hill. And we feel that it's being underutilized. So we would like to also participate with Kane Park in making things like that happen. So we are doing both unified and individual programs. And so let's look at how diverse Taylor is. Right now, it's a significant center for Orthodox Jewish life, and it has been for years. There are private Jewish schools there, there's kosher businesses there, and we feel that right now there's a control of the number of the volume that's going in there, and we'd like to change that. So here's the demographics, the population demographics. And if you look at this, you can see what the mix is. And primarily, I would say going south of Cedar, we're looking at a heavier Black population, a heavier white population on the other side of Cedar. But we even have American Indians on Taylor, and who knew that? So we are looking at what the poverty level is and the percentage of married couples that are on Taylor. So you can see that it's primarily, that district is made up of families. And here's the financial breakdown. So what we want to do is revitalize Taylor. Part of that transformation is already taking place, thanks to Matthew Weimer and his team that are redoing the Tudor complex and are looking at the complex across the street from there, and also the Streetscape program and other programs that are in the works right now. So this should have said deliverables, I apologize. So the deliverables are what we're planning to add to the mix. So that picture actually is of Matthew's strip, what it should look like in the future. And so we're looking at a 1.5 mile district. Now, to put that into perspective, Coventry is a quarter mile. So this is 3 times larger, more than 3 times. So we're introducing beautification landscaping programs, and we would have the snow plowing and have safer walking paths. So again, we would promote this as a walking district, not just a drive-through district. So here's the plan. Right now, we've been holding merchant meetings with an executive committee since January. Most recently, since probably May or June, we've been holding meetings every other Tuesday. So there's been ongoing input from the merchants about what they want. We also recently had held a meeting that was open to merchants and building owners and got input from people at that meeting too about what they want from the district. And we've been sending out emails to the merchants and to building owners, letting them know what our plans are. The first step would be to create branding to showcase the collaborative efforts of the City of Cleveland Heights, Cuyahoga County, specifically for wayfinding programs, Karen. And work on that so that we have that in the works at least, because that will take a while for everybody to approve a logo and anything else involved with branding. The umbrella programming, we want to get started with figuring out what that'll be so that we have it in place in 2026 and we can get moving with hiring people, getting things going and figuring out exactly what the dynamics will be. So the international flavor becomes prominent in what we're trying to achieve in terms of getting Taylor promoted. We will promote the Orthodox portion of South Taylor. We will promote the unique qualities of South Taylor as to Superior. And we'll leverage the benefits of Kane Park. So overall, we want to change the look and feel of Taylor. And this will be done through the things that are outlined here. And also just because the merchants will be working in collaboration with us, doing what they can on a street level. Ooh, sorry. We can't do this right now without anything. Right now, we have no money. And no money means no money for a lawyer, no money for anything. I have been doing this gratis for them. And I'm committed to continue because Taylor is part of my neighborhood. I do not live specifically in Taylor, but I've lived in Cleveland Heights for 40 years. So I'm pretty familiar with Cleveland Heights. So we do need financial support. And I have a copy of the budget that we're proposing. And we want it to happen now. We really want to get things going so that we can kick off 2026 with a fresh new start, know where we can contract, and know what our capabilities are. So that's where we're at for now. We are also, I should mention, thanks to Councilperson Russell, we are talking with Cuyahoga County about a $10,000 grant, which will give us enough seed money to hire an attorney. Okay, I do have copies of the proposed budget. Does anyone have questions on?
Oh, is the budget, can the budget be shown on screen?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. It's not in the PowerPoint.
No, it's not in the.
Oh, okay.
Do I have a copy? Thank you.
Oh, this is a newer copy.
Is it different
Yes.
from what you sent us earlier?
Yes, because, and I'll explain why. If you want to take copies. So the reason for the change in the budget is that the Hebrew Academy has expressed interest in becoming part of the Merchants Association. And so we did not initially include them in the snow plowing budget. We have added them to the snow plowing budget, but because they have concrete stanchions within their sidewalk, they have to be manually shoveled. So there's no equipment that's available for it, so we added the extra cost into this budget. And I have left a message for the rabbi. I've been in contact with him and told him that the snow plowing that we are considering for the Hebrew Academy is frontage only and not for the side streets. Sure. Did he just get a copy or no?
No, this is good.
Did you get one, Gail?
Yeah.
You needed.
I took Gail's. I thought it was
Oh.
the same one that she had sent us
Oh,
earlier.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So a lot of this budget is very similar to Noble. However, because of the change in the street dynamic itself, it is not identical to Noble. Noble has specific areas where we have contiguous merchants. Taylor is not like that. We're split because of Payne Park and also because of the school and University Heights. And so we aren't able to do a program where we can just do one mass program all the time for Taylor. And after speaking with the merchants, they agreed that they would like to do one umbrella program from merchandising and promotion, but they really like the idea of doing individual segments of Taylor with smaller promotions. So that's what we had in mind for this. The rest of it is pretty similar in terms of what they want to do. We do have additional costs because we want to hold merchants meetings, which would be large meetings with hopefully all 80, but close to it, that would include food. Because of the Orthodox Jewish component of Taylor, we'd have to order kosher food in addition to the food that we normally would add for a merchants meeting. And so there are some extra costs in here which were not part of the Noble budget.
Okay.
Questions?
Yes. President Larson.
Thank you. Do you have a fiscal agent for this group?
Yes.
And who
Future
will?
Heights will be doing it. We've already spoken with them about it.
So is your total ask for 3 years of support instead of 2?
It is 2. We would take over in the 3rd. In fact, right now, the merchants on Taylor are talking about becoming a SID because the requirement for the SID is to have 60% buy-in on the frontage. And they believe because of the size of the buildings on Taylor, that would not be difficult for them to achieve, which has, in this case, it is difficult to achieve.
How many of the 80 merchants have been attending your meetings on a regular basis?
Well, we only had one all merchant and building owner meeting, and I would say there were 30 people there.
So you have buy-in from more than the 30 people?
Yes. In fact, we're getting signatures right now and have a comprehensive packet that they're signing to indicate their interest in participating in the 3rd year and taking over the budget.
And I heard you mention Matthew Weimer, so it sounds like he's on board with what you're doing.
Very much so.
Okay. And my last question is, the landscaping is heavy with funding, so is there any opportunity to use some of the services that the city does provide for planting planters and watering them over the summer months?
We would love to have the city water because the watering is costing us a small fortune.
Yeah.
And I had worked with Coventry and I know the problems with the irrigation systems. And also we aren't planning to dig up the entire street, so we wouldn't have an opportunity to do irrigation. But in previous conversations with the prior mayor, he had mentioned, and I believe this is the case, that because the city is strapped in terms of personnel to do landscaping, that we would not achieve the result that we want if we rely on the city to do planting for us.
However, they do contract out. The city contracts out for that work, so I would encourage you to talk to the new mayor.
Okay, that would be
I
great.
really would, because
I have no problem with that.
they're
at
doing
all.
the work on Noble, right?
Yeah.
They did the baskets and the planters on Noble.
Right, except the response that we've had from the Noble merchants is that they were dying and that there were
Well,
problems.
this particular contractor this year was
Yeah.
not doing the work the previous contractor had done.
Right,
So I'm hoping there's room for,
that would be great. I mean, we are totally open to having the city contribute whatever it can.
and it's-
That expense is taken away from promotions, so we would love to
and
do
now's the
that.
time, Lyra.
Yeah.
Now's the time.
Okay,
I think that's a great suggestion, and maybe what you could do is, until we can get a confirmation from the mayor, the new mayor coming in regarding hopefully changing the contractor back to the old-
deluxe, yeah.
back to deluxe. If we can see that happens, maybe if it's okay with the members of this board to be able to maybe leave that there and then remove it once we have confirmation, just in case something goes wrong, it's there. But just note that once we switch back to deluxe, then that money will go to deluxe.
Okay, so I will schedule a meeting with Councilperson Petrus to talk about what to do for 2026.
Well, on what you just said, the money would from what I would understand is it would not have to be part of your budget because it's the city's contract with Deluxe if we go back to Deluxe. The city paid for the contractor this summer that we all saw didn't work out as well as it should have, right?
That's
I'm trying to be
That's true,
diplomatic.
that's right,
Right,
that's
no, no,
right.
no, I
So-
That's correct.
So it was a contract, the city with that contractor, the city paid those bills, so.
Okay.
So just keep us apprised of that, please.
Oh, I love the idea, so I would love to do
And
that.
my brain went back to something old, that we had a little difficulties with a lot of different things. So with maybe the new mayor knowing that we want to have Deluxe to come back, and if council agrees, then that would solve the problem.
Yeah, okay, I will be in touch with him and I'm in touch with Deluxe anyway, and so that would be terrific if we could work that out.
Thank you, because you know,
Thank you.
you're looking at the city being able to have it, they're already set up to doing all that work, and so
Mhm.
to have you have to set aside that kind of money, I'm just trying to avoid that.
No, that's,
No.
no, Deluxe did such a wonderful job, it's just
Yeah.
that the new contractor, well.
Did not.
I was going
Kim is great, Kim is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. No,
That-
does
that's
that work
all
for
I
you?
Yeah.
Lance is on our board, so.
Yes, I'm very, yeah, that would be lovely.
And we also plan to ask the building owners to purchase planters because we figure that that's not a huge investment for them to make. And if that would give us more planting opportunities instead of just doing spring and summer, we could do a holiday planting in addition to that because that money would take away a lot to buy planters on from the association. So
Would you have a united kind of?
yes, we'd have a
so you
uniform
they all
buy.
look the same?
Yeah, and also we figured for economies of scale, to buy them all at once would make a lot more sense. Yeah, okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Councilman Cobb.
questions, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this. Have you guys filed for nonprofit status?
It's in the process right now.
Okay, and are you gonna file it for incorporation with the state of Ohio?
Absolutely. And the incorporation with the state of Ohio, just to make clear, has been pretty fast and easy for us to achieve, but it really does not achieve what we need to ultimately achieve, which is the 501c3.
And I guess Brian's not here. Do we have a funding source for this? Do we have some ARPA dollars left over, or is this gonna have to?
So this would be the same as the approach from Noble.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So this would be the same transfer of the funds into the general fund, so we'd be working with the same formula that we had with Noble, correct? And then the same fiscal agent would be in place, which is Future Heights, so it would be identical situation to Noble.
And I believe Administrator Dumas did identify both areas of money.
And I'm assuming that the grant agreement terms would be similar to the grant agreement terms for the Noble Association.
Exactly. And the Taylor people are very familiar with the forms that have been approved for Noble, and so they are in agreement that that is fine with them.
And so I won't belabor what I mentioned the other night about working with Future Heights on the art programs. I still think it's a good idea. I do have a question where you say illustration mural -2 design only 35,000. Is that a misprint?
That the design only, the 35,000 would be for 2 murals, not one, and so the painting is separate from the design.
So the design is rolled into the 35,000,
Yes,
and then the mural 2 painting underneath, what is that?
that's to paint both murals. That's how much money we allocated.
Okay, so I'm lost. What is the $35,000 going to
To design 2 murals, and then the physical painting of them would be additional. And in speaking with Future Heights, their boundaries are about within the same kind of parameters. So it wasn't out of line. And again, these have to go out for bid.
Wow. Okay.
At this juncture, to be candid, I don't think that the murals are the priority. The rest of the things that we have going take priority over the murals. And so I'm hoping that we don't have to cause the mural conversation to halt the progress of this budget.
I just believe that there needs, and I think you wanted this in the other, that there needs to be discretion to shift around these spending amounts.
Absolutely. In fact, I've asked the law director to specify in both the Noble and Taylor agreements that there might be changes and fluidity within the budget so that it shouldn't look as if every line item is etched in stone. I have not heard back from the law department about making that addendum to the budget.
That I view these as guidelines
Yes.
as opposed to etched in stone. And I do have, again, since it's going out for bid, I guess I have less concern about that, but I do want you guys to partner with an arts organization to provide some assistance in this.
Yes, and as we discussed at the committee of the whole, we're totally open to talking with an arts organization. It may not wind up being Future Heights, but it would be some arts organization which met the approval of everybody on council.
And you're doing what I did the other night when I said Future Heights. We met
I'm sorry, Heights Arts.
Heights Arts. They're both.
Yes, sorry, I know, we both did the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, if Heights Arts gets involved in the bidding process, that's fine. But I think that opening it up to others makes sense.
And I also ran into a young lady yesterday who has an arts business downtown who does fabulous murals as well as artistry. And I would love to introduce her to you all to see if she would be someone interesting that you would like to work with as well.
That would be great. And I just encountered somebody who's working with Kent who did a huge introduction to Kent mural. That's fabulous. And so we're going to be talking to her too.
Great.
One more follow-up question. So the budget request for the first 2 years is $365,000. Do we know how much will then be left in our business fund? You anticipated that question or no?
These two might be able to answer that. So if Noble and this together, how much would be left in the business fund, you guys know?
Yeah.
Somewhere between 100 and 200,000.
Okay. And that is not, that's not counting the business assistance money that we're just starting to make available. I'm sorry, the grants. The up
Correct.
to
So I've already
10,000.
subtracted that out of the total.
Okay, and so we'd have how much left approximately?
Mid 100,000.
All right.
I'd like to thank both of you for attending. I know you're cloning yourselves by being here, so thank you.
And that would be available for use or distribution in the remaining business districts in the city, in
Yes.
theory.
I do think as we've been thinking about that remaining money, I think we would like to deploy that money as a sign grant program. I think that is a need that is sort of universally across the city needed for people to make upgrades or additions to signage, and it is not a use that typically
That would be fabulous.
works under some of our other programs.
Oh, that would be fantastic. A lot of business owners are asking for.
Yes.
I think it helps individual businesses and also helps the districts from an aesthetic
Aesthetic,
perspective,
right.
wayfinding, things
Yeah.
like that.
Oh, that's fabulous. Great idea.
Thank you.
And then in our city's budget, we have $200,000 allocated for Taylor and Noble Road streetscape improvements. I'm assuming that we'll be working with both of these merchants associations on that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's more the other side of the room here, but
Yeah, so those, that is correct, and the initial conceptual planning study is just about wrapping up, so. And the intent is then to work more closely with the Business Association.
And there are a couple of other committees that are also working on Noble and Taylor. And so my priority right now, at least starting with Noble and hopefully working with Taylor, is to get everybody in the same room so we're all talking about the same thing and figuring out what the boundaries for each of these organizations.
Since I have the planning people here, one other question. If we were to allocate money separately for an arts assessment to be done. Would that go on the planning department capital request budget? Okay.
We would likely manage that.
And just so you know, that is something that during the streetscaping process was discussed that, art would be good to include in it. There was the thinking that while we could identify some things during this planning process, it would be good to have an arts group do an in-depth review of districts.
Those districts being
Noble
and Taylor, okay.
Two districts that we did
All right.
streetscaping on, sorry.
Because at the budget hearing last night, that topic came up. I just needed to find an appropriate place to stick it on someone's budget and find out what fund that should come out of.
511-2055. 101-511-2055.
When you roll those numbers off, they're etched in your mind. Let me give that back. 101-5101-205.
2055.
You know his budget lines.
So you'd have no problem if we added that to your budget for next year. All right. Okay.
See, there you go.
I should not be laughing like that.
Madam Chair.
Sorry.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I know that Brian and Julie have looked at the budget and they may have a couple of questions that
okay.
And some of this, and I don't know if this came out during any of the presentation that we missed,
Did you
it's
get the
kind of,
one we just passed out?
what's that?
Did you get the one, okay, the new one, okay.
Brian, do you want a copy of the presentation?
Yeah. This is the one you were working on, that I saw parts of the other day.
Exactly, yep. Now it's finished.
But like just some of the like differences comparing Noble and Taylor, there's
Yeah.
obviously a different landscaping approach. It looked like, I don't know if you've already,
Yes.
addressed that.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, because the two of you weren't there, Council Chair, Council President, would you like to reveal what we left, where we left things?
I asked if Myra would reach out to the mayor-elect and talk to him about this district being supported by the city's landscaping contractor. And FYI, a lot of us who have seen the particular 2025 contractor are not happy. So we're hoping that there will be some conversation with Kim from Deluxe Landscaping to return, because her ability to keep those baskets and those planters vibrant is unexceptional. I mean, it is exceptional. She's committed to these districts where we've seen these beautification projects. So anyway, Myra is going to reach out to the mayor-elect and see if there's an opportunity to utilize the city's contractor and therefore have it be part of the contract the city pays for.
I also think along those lines, then there's a continuity with Kane Park, which right now we've split off. And so then the whole district will look the same. We're also in contact with Ryan about how this impacts Severance and the revitalization of the Severance area, so that the branding continues throughout Taylor and doesn't just stop when you get to the edge of Euclid Heights Boulevard where the Severance entrance is. So we are in conversation with him also.
And is this the same snow plowing person?
Yes, that we're using for Noble. Yes, except as I explained too, we received feedback from the Hebrew Academy that they want us to do their snow plowing too. And so I had to add on to the budget to accommodate that, because theirs has to be manually shoveled
Oh, okay.
because of concrete in the area. And I also let the rabbi know we are not doing it around the corner, we're only doing frontage.
No, I think to the council president's point, I think whatever we can do as a city, whether it's for Taylor or Noble or other commercial areas, obviously would be hugely helpful and, could impact the budget, and I don't know if it's realistic for some of those things to happen in time for year one of these budgets. But is there, just, I don't know if you've put any thought to it, if you had the opportunity to redeploy some of the landscaping or snow plowing or watering money somewhere else, where that could potentially go.
I think it would go into promotion. I mean, we really need to build up the districts as much as possible. So the more marketing and promotion that we could do for both of the districts would be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great. I think we've heard that from the SIDS. The less that they have to put into those things means they can deploy their funds in other ways to support the current businesses or to bring in new businesses and events. So
Absolutely. And, I think that the merchants are very much on the same table, on the same position with us on that. They would like to get the word out as much as possible.
I think that's all I have specifically at the moment, as I'm getting acclimated to this meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Cobb?
No, I'm
President
good.
Larson? Okay. I want to also inform you that I may have a bank who would be interested in sitting on your boards. I know you all kept talking about you needed someone
Yes.
from a bank.
Absolutely.
And so I've talked to someone with Key Bank, and they're going to look into having someone sit on the Taylor board as well as the Noble board, if you all are still looking for that.
That's wonderful because we know that the banks are federally obligated to support communities, and we were unable to find a bank that would come on board. So if Key Bank is doing it as a local bank, I think that all of us would be very happy with that. Jackie, are you okay with that?
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay.
So I will give you her card. I meant to bring it with me inside, but I think I left it in the car. But I will give you her card so you can contact her and send her all the information.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay? All right, is that it for merchants? So Councilman Carl, are we good with moving this out of committee and giving this to the law director to write up the agreements so that we can get it on our agendas?
Yes.
All right, Council President, I know you're not a part of the committee, but you're here, and I wanted to have your opinion as well.
Yes, I'm interested in having it vetted. It should be similar to what we've seen come through for the Noble. So we're becoming more familiar with the agreement that the law department wants to establish, and the accountability for providing all the receipts and getting the bidding process going and being careful about conflict of interest. So all those components that we've had discussions about
Yes.
apply here as well.
Correct, they've all agreed to it, and I believe she just put in for the, 25,000 for startup
Yeah,
funds.
you would,
The seed money,
yeah, the same.
Money.
would you be needing a larger amount for this?
No, in fact, we've already used part of, they had some remaining money from the previous Merchants Association
Okay.
that we used as a down payment on the snow plowing, so they're
Okay.
already started for their snow plowing, so I don't need that, anymore for them.
Thank you.
And just so you all know, the first reading for the $10,000 that I was able to get for you for seed money will be read at the first council meeting of
December 1st.
December 1st. So if you all would like to be there, feel free to be at the county's county council's meeting on December 1st. I'll give you the information, and also you would have to present before their planning committee, and that's December.
County Council.
It's December.
Yes, county council.
Yeah.
That's December.
That's December 1st.
So you would have to present there. So Myra's been through it with Noble, so you all need to be present for that. So just put it on your calendar.
And we would have had more attendance from Noble this morning, but there were some medical issues and other things happening that were conflicting, so my apologies.
Our meetings tonight at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
meeting too.
Okay. So if there's nothing further regarding the Merchants Association, look at there, we have time to spare.
Well, and I also wanted to thank council for passing the Noble budget because it was a while coming and we're very happy that we're able to proceed from here, so thank you.
And hopefully Director Hannah will have all of the additional things put into the agreement. And hopefully we'll be able to push this forward because I did get a confirmation from the Mayor Kuda that he would make sure these were done and passed before the last meeting in December.
Terrific.
Okay, so thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone.
You're more than welcome to stay for the next part if you wish, and if not, you are more than free to go. And now we're gonna bring up our zoning portion of our meeting, and Eric and you all, once you all leave the table, everyone just come on to the table.
Thank you, we're done.
Yep, we're done. All
Thank
right,
you very
thank you.
much. Thank you.
Please remind me to give you the bank.
Oh,
bank plates.
believe me, I'm gonna remind you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you want to keep a copy.
No, you can.
I got
Yeah, I knew that.
Feel free to come to the table if you like. Oh, you're fine?
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, yeah, comments. So they
We know
didn't
that guy.
respond. Well, it's the council meeting. Committee.
So who would you like to hear from
No, it wasn't.
first?
It's just a
So I
potential
go,
committee
you
of the
tell
whole
me,
file.
because I'm gonna turn the meeting over to you.
So people,
So I don't know if we should have Ryan or you,
A lot of
or you can
comments.
just Ryan, how would you like
council
to?
about seconds.
I have a question to go first.
Okay,
And then we can have Brian
Yeah, it's worth.
okay,
do the Q&A.
I'm gonna turn it over to you so you can lead it. Okay, so at this portion of our meeting, we're going into the zoning and that is ordinance 225 and it was on first reading. And this was for the Severance overlay. We have Ryan Porter on screen to accompany us here to go over the zoning, and we have Director Zamp. I'm gonna turn the meeting over to him to proceed,
I think it's on the
or Karen Canoe.
desktop.
Oh, it's on the desk, okay, thank you, I was gonna say, it's, I don't know where they put it, closed it out, so there we go.
So at this time, I'm turning this meeting over to our Director of Planning and Development, Eric Zamp,
Sorry, give me 1 second.
And I'm gonna
and Karen
turn
Canoe.
both of you over to Karen just because of my voice.
So I guess as the planning department, we're happy to be here with the committee and talk to you about the severance zoning. I did want to relay that our planning commission chair, Jessica Cohen, would have liked to have been present, but because of work obligations, she couldn't be here at this meeting because it's the middle of the day.
Okay.
But let me just go ahead and move on. We wanted to remind you that we're here today because we're here to discuss ordinance number 226-2025, which and 227-2025, which were introduced by council on November 3rd. As you know, certain part. The ordinance is a result of a petition from MPACT in order to effectuate and incentivize the vision of Severance as a mixed-use walkable neighborhood. MPACT proposed a new form-based overlay district entitled the Severance Overlay Zone, and that's really what Ordinance 226 speaks to. Ordinance 226 has two attachments. Attachment A is the existing zoning code with updated regulations left as red lines so that you can see where those updates are taken care of. And attachment B is the new chapter 1149 with regulations specific to the optional severance overlay zone. The second piece of legislation is ordinance 227-2025, and it's proposing a new zoning map change, which would show us on the zoning map where the severance overlay district would be applied. So again, just because this is zoning, and I know that council members are familiar, but I thought it'd be important for us just to once again quickly review the process of a zoning map and zoning amendment change. This is all regulated by our zoning ordinance 1119. So as I said, this was introduced by council on November 3rd, and on November 3rd, they also, per our zoning code, referred it to the Planning Commission for review and comment. So the Planning Commission considered the recommendation at their regular meeting on November 12th. They did have a 4-hour meeting, and they worked extremely hard. Any of you that have the opportunity to look at that will see how diligently they worked to get through this. And they did then make a recommendation to council to consider approval of this zoning map change as well as the zoning text amendment change with some recommendations. And they also stipulated that they want to continue reviewing the code and will most likely have additional comments. So at their December 10th meeting, they will again take this topic up for consideration and then reply back to council with most likely some additional recommendations. So going back to this, we added and council added, and this is good for just public information, some additional meetings that are not regulated by the zoning code, but it's good for council to hear about these changes. So there was a joint meeting of the Committee of the Whole and the Development Committee of Council. That was a work session. It was an opportunity to hear from staff and from the applicant. And that was just November 17th. It was, of course, referred to this committee to really review and get into more of the details of it. And that's today's meeting, which is November 19th. As I said, Planning Commission will review this again on the 10th of December, and that's an opportunity for public comment. Then there is the public hearing by council on December 15th. And that, of course, is an opportunity for public comment. And then finally, council could consider it either on December 15th or on December 17th.
What is the work that needs to be completed on the 10th? What will they be doing on the 10th?
So Planning Commission wanted to take some time to look at some specific areas. They wanted to look at civic spaces. They wanted to look at parking. There were some specific sections within the code and chapters that they just wanted to take a second look at. So when we get to further in my presentation, I'm going to review the recommendations that they've already made. So we've already looked at certain sections of the code, the proposed new 1149, and made recommendations. For example, we've talked about uses, and but they wanted to take a second and a more in-depth look about civic spaces, parking, and I think there were some other areas too that, at the top of my head, I'm not recalling. But
Okay, I just have a question, Council President Larson. So on the 15th, that's public hearing. Will that also be a special council meeting a council meeting as well? So it's it will be a regular council meeting.
Correct.
With a public hearing attached to it.
Yeah, the public hearing will be first and then our regular meetings. And the reason that we've added the 17th on as a holder for that date is in case, because the public hearing is the same night as a regular meeting, and we may need to give us a couple of days. So
Okay.
Addie's put that on the calendar for now.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
So let me just start with the zoning map change because I think it helps us frame the area in which we're talking about. On the left is the current zoning map, so you can see the light purple areas, Severance, Town Center, and it's currently zoned S1, and around it is all a single-family housing. You can see on the right picture is the proposed Severance Overlay District. That's the hatched area, and this overlay district would cover all of the Severance Town Center area, as well as a portion of a couple properties adjacent to Severance, currently owned by the Board of Education. So most of us know that as the Milliken School area. It's important to remember that this is an optional overlay zoning district. So that means that any property owners within that district could continue to operate and function under the existing code. So if I'm in the single family district and I want to remain single family, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
By opting into the Severance Overlay Zone, there's a little more flexibility in some of the uses and designs. And so that's why you may want to opt in, but you don't have to. It would be up to the property owners to make that determination.
Can you give us just a quick synopsis of what type of changes from single family to
So in just
benefit them, I guess?
So it's really more about how that single family would be organized. So in the single family, you're required to have a minimum lot size of 50 feet wide and 7,500 square feet. This would allow some flexibility on the types of single family housing you may want to have, or the size of those parcels.
Okay.
In a nutshell.
Okay.
Chairman Russell, thank you. There has been concern expressed at the Planning Commission meeting, which I've watched half of it.
Yeah.
about the inclusion of these other areas in the overlay map. So can you talk about what that means?
If I could, let me just show you, because I think the only area that is included in the overlay is the hatched area. If I'm gonna go up and just point to it, it's gonna help you a little bit. So it's just this portion that's included in the overlay. So in the planning commission, there was some discussion because there exists two ways now to access Crest and then come down into the Severn. And so if you remember, and I'll get to that when we talk about our recommendations, planning commission was suggesting that those should remain pedestrian or multi-use type paths, not vehicle access.
Right.
So those were I believe those were, but the balance of this neighborhood remain a single family. And this gets into a little bit more of the code for the Severn's overlay district than I intended, but this would be what would be the SO3 section. And so the maximum height in an SO3 is 35 feet, which is what a single family home's maximum height is permitted to be. But there's also these green areas, which I know on this map, it's geometric, it's hard to see because you don't have an aerial under it. The intent was to hold currently the S1 zoning has a buffer zone. So those are the trees that we think of along the edges of Severance. This buffer zone was intended to be drawn around those existing trees so that this would remain a conservation area, but that no development would take place. And the same is true with this rectangle over here.
If I may,
Yes, go ahead.
Is it mandated that those hashtag areas have to be in the overlay map? The yellow hashtag?
This part? No, this is all proposed. So what the proposal is that this would be would be part of the overlay, but you have to opt in. So as a property owner, I could say, I don't want to be part of the overlay. I'm just going to continue being single family zoned. And that's the way you would continue until you opted in to the overlay.
And can you show me where the Milliken Woods is on there, please?
Well, this would be the Milliken area. And so all of this is where the wooded area currently exists, so between Crest and Severance.
And I've walked in those woods and it's wet, so is somebody aware that that's a wetlands?
So as you can see, it's being preserved as a conservation area where no development would take place. So that's the intent, is not to have development take place in those wooded areas.
Thank you, that's very helpful, Karen, I appreciate it.
Can I just jump in for a second? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. But I just want to note that my team is going to put together.
Specify anywhere in the document.
So again, that's the preference. I mean, that's the difference between the two zones, and it's proposed as an optional. You opt into the zoning.
Can you provide the reference, excuse me?
Hold on one second.
Sorry.
Let her finish it, then we'll have have all of you be able to ask questions.
Okay.
Okay. So then let's just go into ordinance number 226, which included both a red line of the existing zoning code. This included some definition updates, some reorganization of the definitions we had, because they originally were alphabetical and over the years had gotten a little bit out of order. So this was a time to kind of clean that up.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, then there's some things that you just have to do to make the code work, because when you make a change in one place, it impacts other places. So we're cleaning up places like making sure that the permission and cross-referencing occurs under establishment of districts and maps, and what the zoning administrator authorities are. One of the big changes that we are recommending as part of the zoning code is that we would revise who manages the Severance area, Severance Town Center. As you know, the S1 district currently, whenever there's anything that needs planning commission or a board of zoning or a variance, would go to what's now called the Board of Control. Mm-hmm. We're recommending that this area should be treated like all the other areas of Cleveland Heights, and that would then come under the auspices of the Planning Commission. Or if you were still under the old S1 zoning, it would be the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. Okay. So that's just I think that's one of the biggest changes. The rest of it, I think, is really just cleaning up language so that it plays nicely with what will be, as you see, attachment B, which is the new chapter 1149. This is really what structures that form-based code. It is a form-based code, so rather than being organized around uses, which is the balance of our cities organized around what use. So in single-family zoning, our only use that you're allowed to have is a single-family house. So this is really more structured around all of those different chapters where it outlines very specifically what you can or can't do in terms of height and density, placement, there's blocks. And Brian's gonna get into all that much more thoroughly, but these are the different sections of that. And the administration, of course, is this chapter that would talk to you about how you would make an application to this area under the severance overlay zone, and then how that approval process moves forward. The design standard manual is really important because that really dictates how things will look and function within this district. And again, Ryan's going to speak to all of that more thoroughly, so I'm going to move on, but we can always circle back to this should we need to.
We were doing some zoning around, I can't think of what you call it, the carriage houses in the back.
Accessory dwelling units.
ADUs,
Yeah, we've been talking about accessory dwelling units.
Yes,
That's not up in the, that's a separate zoning consideration.
Okay,
It's not part of
part of
this.
this, okay.
Okay, so then I wanted to let you know that, the planning commission as well as outside legal counsel and planning staff did make recommendations. So planning commission's recommendations really were based on, staff as well as our outside legal counsel. I just wanted to review a few of those. Some of these really were just typographical or formatting errors that we wanted to get cleaned up. In the interest of time, I'm not going to review those because that's really just a format or a typo. I wanted to get into the more substantial areas. So on page 1, we're talking about the severance overlay zone, and it makes reference to the master plan. And both legal counsel and the planning commission and staff feel like it should say that the proposed new sentence should say something along the lines of the language of the severance overlay zone is defined districts, and they shall endeavor to relate to the city's adopted master plan as opposed they shall. The master plan is now 12 years old. We didn't want to make it mandatory that you adhere to something that was written 12 years ago, but it should endeavor to meet the objectives that were outlined in that plan. Again, on page 1, there was some cleanup around, we wanted to be sure that right away there was some clarification, and we wanted to be sure that that you were opting in. So it describes the procedures and involvement that are required for an application for a site plan approved. So we added some language there to make sure that it was clear that you had to apply to have once for the SOZ to apply. You can't just say, I'm going to be part of that now. You have to make application and move forward with that. Okay. Continuing on, there was the recommendation to change the roadway type. So part of the plan shows different types of roads, and because it's form-based, each of those roads have standards about widths and how they relate to the properties. There were 2 roads, one to Crest and the other one to Staunton Road Extension, and the recommendation is that both of those become pedestrian pathways and that get relabeled and indicated in both the standards where we talk about streets as well as on the map. Okay. Under permitted uses, there was a lot of discussion around permitted uses. Research and development is going to be changed to a conditionally permitted use. That's the same as all our other zoning districts, and we felt like it made sense for it to follow that same format. The Planning Commission and recommendations include adding residential and single family and detached 2 families in the SO3 areas, and impact is what most agreeable to that. As you can see, we have a little bit of the map. This is the areas that would be closest to the existing single family properties. They were suggesting that under residential and residential uses that we should allow as an accessory use a residential or community room for either single family homes or for apartments, and that would be accessory to that primary housing use. Under arts and culture, We're changing museum and art galleries from a permitted use to a conditionally permitted use. That was because there was discussion around traffic and parking, and that if they're just permitted by right, there needed to be an understanding of what impact it might have on this as it evolves into a thriving mixed-use district. Under institutional uses, we changed religious charity from not allowed to being conditionally permitted in the SO3 district. Again, this is the light purple area that's closest to the single family properties. Initially, that type of use was not going to be permitted in that area, and the planning commission members felt strongly that we should have that as a conditionally permitted use, as it is in the balance of our communities. And that it would be changed then in the SO1 and the SO2 to be permitted, because under legal counsel recommendation, religious use should be treated the same as any nonprofit use in those districts, and they're permitted by right. So that's why that was changed. And then under light industrial category, the recommendation is to remove a data information center. The belief is that that's just not a use that would blend in well with the intended vision of this being a mixed-use, walkable neighborhood or community. Okay. On pages 12 and 14, there was just some wording done for clarity. We started to look at parking. I think we wanted to do some additional look at parking, but one of the statements on parking was that on-street parking spaces along the frontages of lots shall count towards satisfying the total parking requirements of a site. And there was discussion that this should not be permitted for residential uses because there would be overnight parking. And so that sentence, so it was some language will be added to make it clear that that was for non-residential uses, not for residential purposes. So let me just keep going, right? So then just a couple more, and then we'll be able to move on. So there was some talk about, especially from our outside legal counsel, that anytime there's any encroachment into a right-of-way, now it's not been determined yet. Initially, these right-of-ways would most likely be developed by the developers, and except for Severance, the current Ring Road wouldn't necessarily be a city or publicly owned right-of-way, but at some time in the future that could change. But because of frontages and the desire to have activated street and areas, there was a recommendation that be some language about licensing and being allowed to be on public right-of-way. For example, outdoor dining. If outdoor dining were to occur in the public right-of-way, there should be some standards, as well as a license from the city allowing you to be there. And so that's really just a safeguard should that type of development occur.
Who will be responsible for the Severance Circle Ring Road?
That's the city's property, and so that would remain city. It's a city street right now. It's a dedicated city street, so that would remain a dedicated city street.
So once, if anything happens here, then that road would be, redone during the same time of the construction.
Yes, that's the intention, and the intention is to look at how that road is designed to make it more, to blend in better with a mixed use development,
Okay.
as opposed to what it looks like now.
Yeah.
There's some clarifying language about what the zoning administrator is allowed to do or not allowed to do. The preliminary application process was looked at, and it was intended to be in there, but somehow didn't get in there. So we recommended that they added in the definitions, which would have been that red line section of our code, a definition of the technical advisory committee. And that committee definition is that the technical advisory committee is established to ensure early coordination between an applicant and the city under the Severance overlay zone. And we added language under 1149.32, that the technical advisory committee will consist of the zoning administrator, the public works director, the fire chief, the police chief, the chair of council's planning and development committee, the chair of the planning commission, and the chair of the architectural board of review. And that the TAC members may elect to send a representative in their place. So that language was added, so it was made clear who that technical advisory committee is. And when you look at the application process, you'll see that committee is really important, that even before you make an application to the city formally, you would meet with this committee to talk about what your intentions were and how you would adhere to the different standards that are within this code. And Ryan, sorry, we'll be talking more about that. I'm probably jumping too far ahead of some of that. So we added that we needed to add the power for planning commission to comment on design review, because the process says that ABR would make recommendations and review it, and then planning commission obviously then could comment on those during their process. We did look at the planning commission. This initially said that in process, the planning commission would have 45 days to render decision. There was some concern about timing just because of when meetings meet and the timing of things. So we extended that to recommend 60 days rather than 45 days. And then finally on chapter 26, again, on page 26, this is 1149.35, they'd outlined a process for amending this chapter. And the recommendation is that we should follow a zoning amendment process like we do for the balance of our zoning code and follow chapter 1119, which of course the applicant is happy to do, rather than a separate process that was outlined in the code. There was a recommendation that all of the lanes, traffic lanes should be a maximum of 10 feet wide, and planning commission is making that recommendation. There was a note that I think was held over from perhaps a model zoning that ABR would review pavement. Our ABR doesn't review pavement, so we should take that out. That's just not a necessary thing for them to be looking at. And then I think that's it. The rest of it was clarity information to go on. So I didn't add that in there. I did mention that. That's the 10 feet. It's 10 feet. So one of the reasons why we are the zoning was suggested was that based on the current zoning that we have is a Euclidean form, and the built environment is regulated around uses, and the shift to a form-based code is really essential as an approach to create that more walkable mixed-use neighborhood which is what we're trying to do. We understand that there's a lot of information packed into here, and we have developed a website that you have it on here under zoning is complicated. Under the Severance Town Center redevelopment, we have a resource page. So we have a basic tutorial about what form-based code is from a YouTube. And then just all of the information that we've been given from the applicant is on there too, so that you can at one place look at the different ways and things that have been happening around this redevelopment. Also, we think it's important that you be able to see some of the discussions that has occurred at the Planning Commission. In October, Ryan Porter came to just talk about form-based code a little bit. It was before his formal application had started. So that was videoed, and so you can watch it online, and there's a link on the screen. And then all 4 hours of Planning Commission's work, and it was really good. It's good hard work. It's refreshing to see people moving forward, and they had a lot of discussion about why it was important to keep moving forward. And that is available also online, as is, of course, all council meetings. So because our committee of the whole meeting had a brief presentation, that's another resource that people can go to get more information about this. So moving forward, let me just again, these are the meetings that have already occurred, the public meetings that have occurred. So it started on October 21st with the submission. Council met on November 3rd and introduced the ordinances and recommended Planning Commission review and comment. At the November 12th meeting, Planning Commission did review and make comment, and they moved it forward because of the state law, which requires council to have a 30-day notice before they can hold a 30-day comment from Planning Commission before they can hold a public hearing. So then that brings then on Monday, we had the work session with Committee of the Whole. That brings us today, which is November 19th, and this meeting with the Planning and Development. The next meeting would be December 10th with the Planning Commission. Again, this is an opportunity for public comment. Then on Monday, December 15th at 5 p.m. is the public hearing, council's public hearing specifically around this. And so comments around the would again be taken. And then if there were, depending on what those public comments are, it could be considered either on December 15th or possibly December 17th. And again, city council meeting is always have an opportunity for public comment. We wanted to take this time to just say, public comment is really important and it's heard. I think, a couple of those recommendations the planning commission put forward came from our meeting and comments made at that meeting. But it really helps us if you can be a little bit specific and talk to us about what it is you're intending. I don't support zoning. Well, it's a fine statement. It doesn't help us craft or respond in a way that could move anything forward. Something that's more important would be like the last point here is I would like to see the maximum height in the B subzone to be reduced from 4 stories to 2 stories. That's something concrete that can be evaluated and discussed. Or I don't support the zoning because the area adjacent to residential homes are too dense. I'd be more comfortable if there was just a 2-story limit. I mean, again, that's something very concrete that we can evaluate as opposed to just an emotional response of, I just don't like this. So because comment is so important, we just thought we'd give a few cues as to how you can help us help the process. So that's staff's presentation. Ryan will get into much more detail about the actual 1149, which is the form-based code section of it. But we're happy to answer questions, or if you want to go to Ryan first and then answer questions.
I did invite the SAG group. Is there any questions from council first?
So why doesn't the current zoning work in the process that we have set up where anything that occurs within that ring is handled by the Board of Control?
So the Board of Control worked fine. If you'll recall, this past summer, we had a couple cases that needed to be heard by Board of Control, and we had a great difficulty. They only meet when needed, and we had great difficulty in getting a quorum in order to have a meeting. And so a couple projects were delayed a couple times. And it wasn't anybody being uncooperative. I think we had some medical issues going on, and so it just the timing of it. I know, I guess, I think if you have really good zoning and we understand what can and how it can be developed, then I think having the planning commission to review it makes a lot of sense as opposed to the Board of Control.
I just wanted to add that the Board of Control is really a relic of the past when this was coming out of the ground in the 1960s. It doesn't really have the right people on it. It's got the mayor and the head of the P&D Committee of Council, and it really, the Planning Commission is the people that you're appointing to do this for the city, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do it for severance.
Okay. And by adopting this proposed zoning changes, you're essentially asking us to take a leap of faith on the development that follows. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I would say that the form-based code provides greater clarity as to what can be done as opposed to the existing zoning, which is really, you could have the same thing built again.
Right.
So there's more clarity, there's more, maybe it's still a leap of faith, but it's a clear leap of faith.
But right now, we don't know what will follow these zoning changes. Is that fair to say?
We don't have a development.
We don't have a development plan in place. And that will be controlled by who? MPAC or NAMDAR?
So I
Or
think
both?
I think that's a question for Ryan, but from our point, from the city's point of view, it's controlled by the developer, who could be many developers.
Okay. And just for the sake of argument, and I'm just putting these tough questions out here to have a discussion on them. Assuming it's NAMDAR, given NAMDAR's track record, why should we have any trust that they will do the right thing for this city?
I think with the new zoning, there's at least this form and this building block that they would have to follow with anything they did. I mean, currently they're not doing anything. So I guess that's a risk. But should we have this zoning, any development or anything that came in that would have to follow the zoning regulations, and it's very clear within the code how things should appear and be organized.
Right. If we were to put these zoning changes up to the voters, as occurs in some cities where the zoning changes have to be approved by voters as opposed by a city council, do you have any sense as to what the bulk of residents would do with this? Is that impossible to know?
I think I'll answer it in two ways. I think it's impossible to know because we haven't done that here in Cleveland Heights. Although if you look across the country, typically when zoning changes like this do go before the public, they do get approved. But the support for pushing this in a walkable, sustainable direction is pretty much universal. So it's all the devil's in the details, right? Are people going to be worried about page 12 and they're going to vote against it for that reason? That's hard to tell.
Okay. And what would be the worst case outcome or scenario for the city if we did put these zoning changes through?
I think the worst case scenario would be is that nobody opts into it and they still use the existing S1 zoning, which is the status quo anyway. But the zoning itself, if they do opt into it, it does provide a better framework or a better form.
Okay.
So if we adopt the zoning and nothing happens as far as the development, can you go back to the original zoning, or once the zoning is adopted, it's good?
It's an optional opt-in zoning, so that existing zoning remains.
I mean, the layout, okay.
You have to opt into it. You have to actively choose to use it.
The whole development, the whole layover?
Each individual block would have to opt in.
Oh, okay. And if they didn't, it would stay the same. Okay,
But there's incentives to opt in, obviously.
okay.
Thank you. I'm curious, Ryan, from your viewpoint, you've looked at the master plan. So it's not mandated by the word changes that we put into page 1 of 1149.02. But will you be referencing that as you proceed further?
On the planning commission.
Yeah, can you guys hear me, by the way?
Oh, can't hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah, you can't hear me. I don't know why you can't hear me. Is there a volume issue down there?
You're muted, Ryan. You're muted.
I'm not muted.
You're not muted? He's not.
It might be on our end. Let's see here. Let's try
Here. Turn the volume up on that laptop.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test.
Check the volume.
Test.
Should be all right.
Test.
Change the speaker, change the speaker.
Testing.
Echo.
Testing.
We don't hear
Echo
you.
canceling.
Try it.
Testing.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Sorry, Ryan.
Sorry, I tried to jump in a couple of times actually, and I was like, they're not.
No, we're not.
Anyways, so the question was, for the master plan, we wrote the zoning, we wrote the code originally so that it would shall adhere to that. Your council advised against that, and there was a legal reason. I don't remember what the legal reason was, but it was your council's advice to make it whatever. But yes, I think, my intent is yes.
Okay, when we're talking about the technical advisory committee and you're looking at an application, I'm assuming that ADA compliance will be at top of mind and sustainability will be at top of mind. For very important commitments the city has made to those issues. And with these changes to zoning, prevent NAMDAR from selling bits of Severance as separate parcels. That's our fear, one of the fears that we have.
So, go back up. Namdor's a property owner. The laws of the United States, the property owner can't be prevented from selling anything, right? What you can prevent is how subdivision processes work, what they develop or what they sell it for, right, under your zoning code, right? So what this zoning does is it says, if you opt in and you purchase a piece of land, whether it be a piece from Namdar or a whole thing from Namdar, you have to develop under these rules, right? There's no exception to that, right? Could Namdar break up with me and go subdivide a small parcel and to do something that's not under the code, but under the S1 code allowable? Yes. But we can't prevent that, right? Like you would have to remove the S1 to prevent that. The whole purpose of this is to make it optional and to make the rules of the new option attractive, right? So we're trying to make the overlay attractive so that the S1 is not something people would want to use, right? And the attractiveness of moving into that has rules and there's things you have to do as a developer. It also has benefits like an expedited approval process, right? So, it's like kind of a stick and a carrot type way that we get people to do the right thing to create these blocks themselves. Hope that answers your question. I can comment on some of Councilmember Cobb's questions. I'll let you finish first.
I just have one more question about parking, but I want to wait for you to speak to parking, so.
Okay.
Go ahead, Julie.
I didn't get to address Councilmember Cobb. You did. I just want to be clear, okay? We have a deal with Namdar. The deal with Namdar says if I reach my accomplishments under my joint venture agreement with them, I can force them to contribute the land on a parcel by parcel basis into developments in turn where I wish to bring in co-development sponsors to build and opt in under this code, okay? That's the intent of this whole program. If Namdar and if I don't get to my goals, Namdar boots me, right? I'm probably going to try to do something about that. But nonetheless, if I'm out of the picture, right, I will have no control over whether Namdar contributes or sells for it. But what you do know is that at least going through this process, you've received a new state-of-the-art form-based zoning code, meets the intent of creation of a walkable community, is built upon a model that has won APA awards nationwide. It is something that you will have in your toolbox regardless, so that whether it's me, Namdar, or the next player, you're that much further ahead to getting to the goal that you intend to get to. I will also tell you on a control perspective, the land is usually only 10 to 20% of the project value, right? It might even be less in this community, right? So ultimately, if it's $100 project that's getting built and the land is only $10 that's contributed as equity into the deal, the other $90 people, they make the rules, not the $10 person, right? So there's going to be an equity plug that goes into it. There's going to be a construction lender that comes into it, the sponsor who puts up the equity and provides the guarantees on the construction loan. Like those are the people that make the decision. So whether it's a Flaherty Collins or an NRP or whatever group we bring in, right? Those are the ones that you're going to be dealing with on, designing and developing and building the project. Namdar's not a developer. They don't have the intent of getting into the development business. I am a developer, but I like to do what I do best, which is set up the entitlements, bring in co-sponsors to build different components of it. And that allows me to bring in players that do different product typologies, right? Maybe we have a condo developer at the same time as we have a mixed-use retail and office developer at the same time as a hospitality developer, right? But we are creating a framework and a setup that's supposed to attract multiple different typologies of developers to come in because they know what they're getting, they know what the rules are, everything's clear, it's set up front, they know what they have to pay into, all that is set, right? And that is what has been successful for us in the past in attracting investment.
Okay. So, Ryan, you answered, I guess, did he answer your question?
Well, a couple more,
Go ahead.
and we talked about this beforehand. The concern about including the residential neighborhoods as part of this zoning. How essential is that to the overall zoning? In other words, can we exclude the neighborhoods from this, the residential
I think there's
streets?
still confusion here. There is no residential neighborhood included in this zoning. The only property that you may be thinking of is Milliken.
Yeah.
But other than that, the buffer area as provided is 150-foot deep buffer from the rear yard of each one of those single family homes on the east and the south side of Severance's property. So that's a significant buffer from those residential areas. And again, the optional overlay to placement on top of the Milliken property, excluding all the trees, was put there specifically because I thought it was a good idea to give the school district the opportunity someday, if they figured this was a disposable asset, to either opt into the overlay zone or use the existing single family zoning. In either case, our optional zoning there and the single family zoning allows the same 35 feet of height, right? It's just different typologies. One single family homes and one is townhomes. But in fact, because of the planning commission's recommendation, we're gonna be adding single family homes to our allowability. So it's not really changing much, other than the fact that now at least if Milliken were to be developed into a single family home or a townhome product of low density and 35 feet, they can at least do it through our process instead of the antiquated X1 process for the existing or residential. I don't know what it's called, R3 or something.
So what stops the school district from coming to the city in the future and seeking that rezoning if they decide that they do want to make that property available for a residential development?
No. So to be 100% clear, we are recommending that property is included in this zoning. So they don't have to ask for a zone change. They would just opt in and there could be something done there. But listen, I have had conversations with communities in those neighborhoods who have said it would be great to be able to use Milliken as single family homes. We need more single family homes. That conversation has come up with me. So I thought this was a good idea. The school district has not indicated that anything. I want to misrepresent that they would be willing to do anything, right? But I thought from an economic development perspective and a connectivity between the neighborhoods and the future of Severance, it makes sense. Again, this is a common practice that I don't expect any of you to understand because it's my business, not yours, of creating transect, right? The concept is the highest densities in the core, the center of this project. And as we move to the edges, we go down in density and heights to meet the single family homes. And that entire SO3 district, if people opt into it, they don't have to, would have to adhere to that.
Okay. The other thing that,
Could I just add?
sure,
That, but today, the school district could come to the city with a proposal to build single family homes there. So they haven't, but under the existing zoning, they could also do that. Just, there's nothing stopping them from doing that today.
Have they said anything as dealing with Milliken? Or they just been silent?
Yeah, I've told them in a presentation that I intended on including that property so that they have optionality in the future. They have not commented one way or another on that. So, listen, we can remove it. It doesn't change the world for me in reality. I think it actually hurts everybody. I'm like, you guys have to understand, like, I try to fight to do the right thing, even if it doesn't benefit me, right? So I think it's the right way to go for the future. But again, if everybody's like, wow, let's just pull it back off of Milliken to make everybody feel comfortable, like, I'm not gonna fight.
and then there's a provision and here about affordable housing, requiring a certain percentage of that be affordable housing. As we talked about, I think that is something that the market should dictate rather than it be part of the zoning code. That's just my view on that, which,
Understood. My experience, Councilman Cobb, is that there's a greater likelihood that the market will not provide the affordable housing if you don't have inclusionary zoning provisions. But that being said, I believe people will come to the market to develop affordable housing on this site regardless. But I think that it shows the city's desire to have some of it be affordable housing by putting it in the code.
I don't think the rest of council is gonna agree with Todd on that one.
Probably.
And then, listen, we can talk about the percentages. We did 20, I don't know, like, I've done projects where it's 10 and I've done projects where it's 70, so it's not, and affordable housing just gets a bad name. And it's just unfortunate. The world of affordable housing has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. And some beautiful projects get built that are affordable to somebody who makes $50,000 a year. I actually have some numbers in my presentation for you that you guys can all see that I worked up as to rents and income bands and all that stuff when we're talking about these kinds of projects. It's hard to imagine if you don't understand the numbers. I would say this is another thing that doesn't really necessarily benefit or detriment me, but I think is a good thing to do.
Any more questions, Council?
No, I'm good.
So, Mr. Porter, would you like to go through your presentation and then we'll open it up for questions?
Sure, I think so.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is gonna be the same presentation I gave the planning commission, and please keep in mind that the changes that were mentioned by staff, that we've agreed to all of them, have not been implemented in this PowerPoint. So you will see, I see an example in some of the use tables, some of those changes from permitted to conditional or removal of a use or all that stuff it has not been updated yet because I want to update the code multiple times. I want to get all the comments in and make an update. So anyways, thank you very much for having me today, everybody. I don't think we need to go through the schedule. I don't think we need to go through all the individual steps of the zoning, but we had recapped that for the planning commission, all the steps that have been taken in preparing the zoning since April when we started in earnest. We went through kind of with the commission, all the meetings that we've had over the last 2 years. And I just want to emphasize that I believe all the things that I put as recommendations in this zoning code are consistent with all the statements and discussions that I have had over the last year and a half. Now, that doesn't mean everything that people's recommended is in there. And there may be some distance, for example, on like the civic space conversation with myself and SAG folks. But I've heard everything, and I think from an intent perspective, this code reflects what I've heard. So we talked about what form-based zoning is, but I'll just kind of give a little bit of another brief overview. It's all about the physical form and promoting walkability. So in a Euclidean zoning code, you'd have an area for residential, you'd have an area for office, you'd have an area for industrial, and the residential or the office, as an example, would have an FAR requirement or units per acre requirement or something like that would drive what gets built. Form-based zoning is, okay, what are the uses that we want to see in this place? What are the maximum amount of uses that we want to see of each in this place? And then what do these buildings have to be designed to look and feel and address the street and provide civic space and really create place? What do they have to be designed like? And then what you put in that box is your choice as long as it sits within the uses table that exists and it sits below the maximum density that exists. So it creates that flexibility versus Euclidean zoning or a PDD or a PUD, where you're putting the exact buildings on your plan in the exact location so that over time, as markets change, you're stuck. And you have to go back through the process again to change things. That is the death knell, in our opinion, of these larger scale revitalization efforts. You want the flexibility so that if office is hot, office can be developed. But that office building needs to look like the way we want it, needs to have the heights that we say, it needs to be walkable, it needs to provide civic space, it needs to provide great public realm space, but it's an office building. Maybe it becomes a retail building, right? All retail. That's fine, right? If retail's hot at the time, but it needs to be in the form that we've all agreed to. I always want to emphasize our concept plan was just a concept. Did it help us figure out whether buildings could fit on these blocks that we've created on the right-hand side? Yes. Is this what's going to get built? Absolutely not. It will change. It will be something different than this. It's inevitable. Obviously, we have to bring in sponsors, equity providers, all these people to talk about what they want to build. But the buildings that do end up getting proposed and built still must follow that great form that we've outlined in the code, and still must stay under the height regulations. We still must stay, under the density regulations, and all those rules still apply. But this concept plan was just a concept, and it's more actually relevant for the next phase of this process, where we get into a conversation about how NCAs and TIFs and CRA abatements and all that stuff works. Because I want to set this up so there's visibility over the life of this project for all of that. And the concept then gives us kind of a starting point for that discussion. But it is not the zoning. The zoning code and the map that's relevant to the zoning code is the map on the right-hand side, which is our district standards map or regulating plan, as we often refer to it as. And that map is what drives an applicant when they come in here to look at one of these parcels as to what they can and can't do in these certain areas. Each one of these blocks is divided in, obviously you have block 1 through block 40. And each one of these blocks has different rules, and each one of these streets has different rules, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So again, here is the district standards map. Alone on a slide. A couple of things I want to highlight. I'm going to emphasize the optionality of this overlay zoning, right? So it sits on top of the S1 zoning. People can stay with the S1. They can opt into our zoning. The zoning boundary, obviously, is been part of this discussion. I think maybe what's confused people is that they think that we're going to the single family area because the boundary goes to the rear yards of these single families, the red dotted line. But the buffer zone is what's specifically created to make sure that no one builds within that 50-foot buffer of those single family homes and protects all those trees. I'll talk about the road networks and the connection to Staunton connection and the Crest connection there. So the map is split up into 3 different districts, SO1, 2, and 3. The center, Burger Boulevard, where we imagine over time being the main street of this downtown, is the SO1 district, and that's that darkest purple color. One of the comments from staff was that we need to get a little bit better with differentiations of colors, which we will do. But for now, you can see blocks 11, 16, 17, 25, 26, 27, 18, 12, and 7 sit on Burger Boulevard and have that SO1 designation versus the blocks that are just one shade lighter have an SO2 designation, and then the final shade is the SO3 lowest density. The highest densities in that core and heights. The second highest density is outside that, and the third highest density is in the here to the left. All these maps have other things on them, like if a block like block 8 has a red frontage, where right under where it says circle of Severance Circle on the top of the screen, that frontage has a retail requirement. If a block has a black line on the front of it, then it has what we call a frequent entrance and a glazing requirement. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're trying to obviously make sure that there's mixed use. We're trying to make sure that in the form, there's glazing on the first floor in areas that we think are gonna be more mixed use in nature. Frequent entrances to buildings, it's part of the form to prevent things from being built as like blank walls along the sidewalk, right? So this is an example of one of the dozens of diagrams that we have in there that people have to adhere to. And this is what we're talking about with form-based zoning. We've very specifically on each block and each street regulated from the face of the curb on your left-hand side to the street wall of your building, what can be done where and why, right? So where's your furnishing zone? Where's your pedestrian clearway? What's the public front versus private frontage? How those things have to interact. All of that is very detailed design for each different area, and different areas have different requirements. So obviously Burger Boulevard, there will be a lot more mixed use and retail in nature. Could have a different requirement than something that's, more of a back street, more residential, right? So they all have different feels. The streets. So every street is very detailed and regulated and designed. We went through a lot of back and forth with your transportation committee on these streets, and to be honest with you, we think we pushed the boundaries on walkable, multimodal street designs. They pushed us even further, and the city actually retained outside consultant that helped us with some of this efforts because a lot of it was also conversations with the fire department and their requirements on these street typologies. But you can see each street is has a different designation, an A1 versus an A3 versus a C1. And I think the ones that have gotten a lot of attention are the D3 and D4 in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, going to Crest, and then Staunton 1 D3. And we had originally designed it that one would be pedestrian, would remain pedestrian and bicycle or multimodal only, and that one would be exit only shared with vehicles, thinking that would be good for that neighborhood to be able to exit into their neighborhood. Because if someone comes to visit Severance from another neighborhood, they're not going to exit into that neighborhood. They're going to go out to Mayfield or Taylor. It's a lot faster for them, likely. That being said, people were concerned about that. We immediately agreed with Planning Commission. Both these pathways are going to be, I think it's the D4 design, which is basically just a pedestrian bicycle pathway, which is kind of how it is today. So we're really just mapping the existing condition and making sure that if somebody were to do anything with it, it needs to be improved to a better standard for pedestrians and bicycles. But we will have no vehicular connection to either of those neighborhoods, and it's really just an option for those neighborhoods to continue what they have today already, which is this pedestrian connectivity. These are some of the street designs. So that this A1 street design, you can see, here on the left-hand side, entering and exiting Severance Circle from Taylor to Mayfield. B1's an example. That's Burger Boulevard. We're still debating the B1 a little bit. There's been some, suggestions to go back to a parallel parking scheme versus an angled parking scheme. So that might tweak a little bit, but it's pretty close to what it is. And again, this is this D4 condition. This is what we're talking about. So it's, a shared use with just bicycles and people, no cars, right? Which is what it is today, but it's obviously dilapidated and not cared for the way it could be. Civic space requirements. So this has been a long process going over this with your team, and we believe that the best way to finance and bring forth actual civic space, and that civic space is distributed equally throughout the development, but can also fund larger civic spaces, is to have a requirement for each developer. So each development site is required to provide 10% of its site area for public civic space. Civic space designs are very detailed options are outlined in the codes, whether it's a plaza or a piazza or a green space. Those are in the code. And you do have the ability, if you would like, to take two reductions to your 10%. One is if you provide private open space in your development, so accessible only to, say, your office building, then that in theory reduces the burden of civic space for your office employees in your area. Therefore, we would allow you to take a 25% reduction to your requirement as long as you build that same amount of space for your employees privately, say within your courtyard of your building or wherever you would build it in your footprint. The other reduction available is to buy out of 50% of it. And the buyout fee we have set at $35. That's after research and discussion of a combination of pricing for hardscape and softscape on a percentage basis. And we believe that's kind of a sweet spot that like makes the decision not easy to buy out every time, but then funds a decent amount of money such that over time, you know, maybe there's a couple $1 million that get funded into a segregated fund as it's written in the code that the city controls. I'm going to recommend once we form an NCA that the NCA ultimately either controls or advises on it. So that larger civic spaces that can be a down payment on larger civic spaces that can be used for maintenance and other civic uses, space uses. So I'm anticipating that a lot of people will build spaces throughout, and then some people will buy out, and then there will be funds available for I know SAG's in the room, and I'll just repeat it on camera and record it. There's nothing in this code that prevents a central park from being built. We have some space in between us as to how many acres that park should be, but there's nothing that prevents it. So be clear about that. These are some of the permitted civic spaces. We're going to go through these. So this is the frontages. This is not something I'm going to go through in detail with you, but this is just to explain to you how regulated this whole environment is, right, from a design perspective, right? So if you're on, for example, a street type A, right, and you are designing what's called a storefront, if you scroll down on private frontages, on street type A for a storefront, you have to have 75% of your frontage is glazed, has to be glazed. Right, and that glazing requirement is between 2 feet and 8 feet, right? So, and then on a street type A at the top, you can see all the way at the top public frontage areas, the distance from the face of the curb has to be 12 feet, so that's a 12-foot minimum public sidewalk area, right? The furnishing zone can be 4 feet of that. The pedestrian clearway where people walk, people go through is 6 feet, clearance for strollers, all these other types of things. And the transition zone can be 2 feet. And you can see as you go to the right, all that changes depending on what street type you're on, right? The sidewalk goes to 14.6, or the sidewalk goes to 12, or or goes to 20. All these things are different depending on the street typology where we are on the site, and kind of that look and feel. These are the heights that are allowable for each district. So just to kind of orient you, this chart regulates the allowable minimum and maximum heights of your buildings in the different districts. You can see the districts listed on the left-hand side: SO1, SO2, and SO3, right? And so for each one of those districts, there's 3 different development standards. Development Standard 1, Development Standard 2, Development Standard 3 listed at the top of the chart. Those development standards change depending on the size of your parcel. So it's a very common practice in form-based codes and in design theory that if you have a bigger parcel, you should be able to do a larger bulk of a building, whereas it would be very awkward for you to have a very small postage stamp parcel and be able to go really high, right? That would create this very awkward environment. Right. So you can see the difference between, I'll just talk about the 2 extremes, Development Standard 1 and 3. In Development Standard 1, you have to have 50 feet of frontage minimum and 5,000 square feet of site area. In Development Standard 3, you have to have about 150 feet of frontage in 30,000 square feet, or almost an acre of land. 3/4 an acre. And in development standard 1 under SO1, you can go to a minimum, you can build a building that's a minimum of 2 stories and a maximum of 5. In SO3, it's a minimum of 1 story and a maximum of 2, right? As we move towards those single family home areas, 2-story buildings, right? Then when you get into kind of development standard 3, that's where you can get to higher heights in SO1 with a maximum of 8 stories, right? And still, SO3 is still 1 and 2 story building, right? So that SO3 standard or SO1 standard only exists on that Burger Boulevard Center darkest area, right? And you can only get to that highest stories if you have enough frontage and enough site area. That's a good overview. There's setbacks also. So when you get to a certain height, your building has to step back so that from the street it looks shorter, right? So there's setback requirements, which is very common practice also. Permitted uses. So this is our use table. So these are all the uses that are allowed in the overlay zone. Again, I'll just repeat that this is not updated post comments from Planning Commission. It will be, but we're obviously open to additional comments. It's broken down into major categories of, retail, office, residential, arts and cultural, hospitality, institutional, light industrial, parking and utilities. And then in each SO1 and SO2, they have the same permitted and conditionals, but SO3 is treated differently and has different permitted and prohibited and conditional uses because, again, it's buffering that single family home neighborhood. So we're sensitive to what can and can't go there, which then has to spin back to what type of building can be built there, even with the use allowable. And some of these are going to change the permitted amounts. And I think Commissioner Kittle went through that.
Ryan,
Yes.
what is the height for hotels? A hotel vision in this area at all?
Yeah. So again, just to be clear, the hotel. So let's go to hospitality. So the hospitality, you can build. If you see in the upper right hand corner, where it says hospitality, in SO1 or SO2, so any of the darkest and the second darkest purple color, you can build a hotel.
Okay.
Permitted. In SO3, you can't build a hotel, but you can build an inn or a bed and breakfast as a conditional use. Okay? So that would have to have extra approvals because it's, a budget in single family home neighborhoods. Even with the 150-foot buffer, it's still so, I had envisioned the hotel as going in block 5, right? That upper right-hand corner over there. But I don't know that the hotel's gonna go there. Maybe a hotel developer comes in and says, hey, I really wanna be on 22, right? They can go to 22 and that's fine, right? I don't think they're gonna end up, at 29, right? Maybe, I guess the hospital's right there, but I think the hotel's gonna want visibility to Mayfield or Taylor and probably Mayfield, right? That's my development opinion, but nothing prevents the hotel from going on any of the lightest, or the second lightest and the darkest purple color areas. Retail requirements, I think I talked a little bit about this earlier on the regulating plan map. You can see where the lines are, but basically each one of these streets and each one of these blocks has requirements. Some of them, like A streets, require 40%. If you have a red boundary on it, it requires 40% of your building frontage be retail or office. A B street, which is basically that Main Street, Burger Boulevard, requires 75% would be retail or office space, or restaurant, obviously. So these are the different percentage requirements for those. And next we have kind of the use thresholds. So these are the threshold maximums over time that could ever be built under this zoning code. And we've kind of listed those thresholds as 2,500 units, 175,000 square feet of retail, 85,000 square feet of office, professional, and medical, 250 hotel rooms, 50,000 square feet of arts and culture, 75,000 square feet of institutional, civic, and educational, 50,000 square feet of light industrial and arts and production. Now, that doesn't mean someone can't come in and say, hey, I want to do actually 100,000 square feet of light industrial and arts and production, but you guys would have to approve that, right? So it's not as of right. So if they were to pierce the thresholds, it would have to come in for more. And then this gets into the conversation we were having earlier with Councilman Cobb about the threshold requiring a certain percentage, each threshold of affordable housing at 20% of those thresholds. So the first 850 units before the next 1,000 units are built. And one of the comments from Planning Commission, to be clear, is to make this chart more clear in their mind, and which I agree with. We should make the numbers cumulative, so it would say 850, then up to 1,850, then up to 25. But the purpose is that after that, before the 851st unit is built, 170 of those units are supposed to be 20% are supposed to be affordable to people making up to 80% of AMI. And so I've outlined some numbers for you folks, just so you can understand what that feels like. So if which is very typical, if a program was done for between 60 and 80% of AMI, basically the ranges of rents and income ranges at 30% of your income going to rent are below. So a one bedroom would be 1,000 to 1,300, and that would be for an income range for somebody who's making $40,000 to $50,000 a year. A two bedroom would be 1,200 to 1,500. That's somebody who makes $48,000 to $58,000 a year. A three bedroom would be 1,400 to 1,700. That's somebody who makes $56,000 to $66,000 a year. Affordable for sale units could be priced in a range. This is very hard to do. I want to be clear. Affordable for sale. There's not a lot of programs out there. They're starting to come online. But I'm giving you an example. If they are available, you could get, affordable for sale condos or townhomes in $175,000 to $225,000 range based upon AMI of what people could afford at $52,000 to $72,000 a year in income. That being said, I don't know of a program in the state of Ohio for that. And this code doesn't talk to this stuff, right? This is just, all the code talks to is the income band. It doesn't talk to these price ranges, but obviously these price ranges have to meet those income bands, assuming 30% of your AMI. But it doesn't require that someone builds affordable for sale because there's not really a program for it. The code now is prepared, if there is a program for that someday, that this could be used, right? And then if you look at market rate rents in comparison, we think they're going to be somewhere in the $250 to $3 range. So those same units on average at 800 to 900 square feet, the smaller units would be 2,000 to 2,700 versus 1,200 to 1,500, right?
What about senior living? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
My apology. What about senior living? I mean, that's affordable for seniors?
Senior living, so senior living is a programmatic thing, right? It's not a code thing, right? So all of these categories of affordable rental, affordable for sale, and market rate, for sale and rental, all of them have senior component availabilities too. Senior response, right? That is really the developer and the program's discretion, right? A developer may come in and say, I do, senior housing, I do senior for sale, I do 55 and older, right? All of that's allowable under our code, right? The question is whether that senior player wants to be part of the 170 units of affordability that's required in threshold 1. And maybe they do. Maybe they come in and say, we want to do 50 units of affordable senior rental, right? That would satisfy 50 of the units of affordability in threshold 1. Right? I'll keep going. I can go back to anything. So why form-based zoning attracts investing? I won't read the details, but predictable outcomes, design flexibility, streamlined approvals, market responsiveness. Things can adjust over time to what's financeable and what is the world changes, right? Obviously we've seen office decrease dramatically since COVID and remote working, right? So we have to make zoning codes that can actually react to the world around us, right? Because the world is not stagnant, it's growing, it's changing, it's evolving, right? So the zoning code needs to grow, change, and evolve, but the place can still be regulated and how the place looks and feels and reacts. Land values can be better because of the predictability. Community confidence can be better because of the predictability again, of how you're gonna feel when you're walking around this place. And it's got a huge public realm emphasis. Zoning codes like this, and we get into this debate about civic space and parks and stuff, but in reality, these codes are literally designed to create great places for people to interact publicly, right? Great sidewalks, great park systems, great plazas. That's the whole purpose of this, is to create place and community.
Brian, I wanna pause here if I can for a minute. We have
Sure.
about 30 minutes left and I wanna give some
I'm done.
Oh, you're done?
Perfect.
Perfect timing. I wanna be able to give some people who are here that we invited from the SAG group an opportunity to ask some questions if council members don't have any more questions at this time.
I'm good.
Okay, so is there anyone here that would like to
Thank you.
Paul Volpe?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a very good meeting. This is actually the best meeting. I've been in so many discussions like this, especially recently, but this is the best meeting that we've had. There's real dialogue occurring back and forth, and to invite us to speak, which usually doesn't happen in committee meetings, is a real privilege. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Look, there's so much that Ryan has said that I can't help but agree with, because I'm a big time supporter and longtime user of form-based zoning as an architect, urban designer, and a developer. And I've worked for many, many, many developers throughout the state of Ohio, and particularly in Northeast Ohio, and some of the biggest like Forest City. And my work generally starts with the planning, making drawings. Well, not like that so much, but drawings that show and visualize what is the intent. And
So much.
I believe that the biggest problem here is that the form-based zoning is premature and it's incomplete. We talk about development plans, we talk about form-based zoning. You gotta understand the form before you can create the basis for the zoning. I don't think words are particularly understandable to most people, okay? We represent the community. I happen to be a professional that deals with development and zoning, and so does Bob Brown. But all of us have discussed it, and all of us agree that there are things that are lacking here. And then you throw in the component of time. We just found about this early this month. I learned about this a couple of weeks ago. I didn't realize that we were going to be proposing zoning as a city for this. We knew what Ryan was doing. He's talked to us, me, on numerous occasions. We waited a long time to see some sort of a plan. We really waited for a long time to see a plan. There's a lot of other stuff. But and then when the plan came out, we all looked at each other and said, is that what we want? And that's what you're supposed to ask when you see a plan like that. Especially if you're used to doing plans and looking at plans, you say, well, what is this? And why is that drawn there? And what are these relationships? And you ask things like, well, why are these street types that they're showing and saying, that's what we intend to build? Why did you choose that? Okay, and does it make sense? We haven't talked about those things yet. And I think some of the boards and commissions aren't really equipped to talk about those things without the questions being asked. Why is there so much surface parking here? Okay, those are questions that you ask. Why are we looking at and applying the zoning to the private property? Okay, we need to ask these, and a lot of them have come out today, and they make a lot of sense. an example, just an example of form-based zoning, which, this debate between Euclidean zoning and form-based zoning, the difference is really a nuance. Good planning and design come from good developers, good planners, and good designers, okay? That's where it comes from. You can write all day long, but you have people that want to do something a certain way that may meet the zoning, but it's inappropriate to our community, or it's just a bad design. You're going to end up with what we don't want. So there are things here that need to be discussed, okay? And frankly, I'm so pleased that we're finally discussing them. 15, 16, 17 years ago, I was very active. My office has always been in the Midtown community. And things were beginning to happen. And ultimately, we came up with the technology corridor, and the RTA line got built, and all of those things. But the area around and east of 55th Street to roughly 70th Street was a wasteland. It was about the most blighted section of the city, and we knew we had to do something. So Midtown engaged me, my firm, to do a development plan, okay? It's a conceptual development plan. And we looked at the plan and what we wanted to do with infill buildings, which is what this is about, and relationships to street and infrastructure and site development and landscape and all that stuff. We actually got into something that didn't exist before in our city, which is transit-oriented development. How are these things addressed in the zoning code? Well, they weren't at all. Well, we happened to have Bob Brown, and we sat down together and asked those questions and said, we need new zoning. And I don't know back then if we call it form-based zoning, but that's certainly what it was. It was. And it wasn't, see, the nuance is that all zoning is prescriptive. Form-based zoning is prescriptive, yet it provides for the kind of place, and that is the right word that Ryan used, that makes it all worthwhile and benefits the community, not just the developer. And so Bob wrote outrageously good zoning. And if you look at that district today, because development takes time, especially when it's lots of different property owners along a very busy, blighted street, you see new hotel, you see the Cleveland Foundation's headquarters, you see the new mixed-use technology building. There's a brand new restaurant. If you haven't been there, it's in the ground level of the technology center. Lovely. And it's all, everybody in that building is local startup entrepreneurs, okay? And everybody is a minority in the building, which I celebrate. The food is fantastic. And guess what? Business is good. Nobody thought that kind of thing could ever happen. Pierre's Ice Cream is there. I won't go on. All I'm saying is I anticipate that happening here. Okay?
I'm very familiar with that area.
Are ya?
I lived in that area for 35 years.
Cool. That's great.
So I know it when it was nothing to what it is now.
That's great to hear because it's truly transformative. And that's what we, through our SAG group, initiated by Larry here, the key word was the complete transformation of Severance. Because the whole thing is a blight, other than there are a couple of very good uses that we respect. Dave's and Home Depot. And a few other retail people that are in the wrong place and could be relocated, and other people that we'd like to see bye-bye.
So
And that's the end of it.
What questions do you have for Ryan?
Well, my question is, why can't we take a little time to get this positioned properly, to have the right kind of graphics, urban design graphics and so forth, other than what you're showing, which is a little bit scary to me because the proportions and shapes of buildings look like apartment buildings that are getting built in Ohio City and downtown and everywhere else on the planet. And that boom is going to decline. And I think that what worries me the most, to Craig's question, is that There is no money for the infrastructure. And we're talking about many millions of dollars, especially to build some of the roads that are proposed. That money doesn't exist. So we're gonna give potential developers, when the zoning passes, how is this zoning gonna attract developers? I don't know a developer that's gonna read this, okay? I mean, they don't even like to read this stuff. They come to people like him and me and say, will you read it and tell us if I can build a hotel here and where I can build it? And what's the vision for the place? I don't see a vision here, okay? Even the study that we did, that I drew and developed, had 6 renderings that at least gave you an idea of what this could feel like. There's no emotional content here that reflects the values of our city. So, can we take the time to have the discussions, to develop this fully? It's not gonna happen by December 15th. I just don't know why we're being rushed, other than Ryan's desire to rush us for his reasons. I'm not saying negatively, but this is our one shot. This is our largest piece of land. This is the core of the city. It connects the north side, right where Severance is along Mayfield, connects the north side of our city to the south side of our city. And the last we want here is to end up with something like Cleveland has, which an east side and a west side, okay? A north side and a south side. Great division. Severance could be the unifier, but we've got to believe that. And we have to anticipate what we want and then put together a strategy to get it done and to get it funded. Thank you for the opportunity.
Larry?
Thanks. I just have a quick question. Brian, when you and I talked the other night, we were talking about what's fixed and what isn't by this zoning. And my recollection was that you said, in essence, within the constraints of the form-based zoning, you can put almost anything in there that you want to put in there. Break.
It's anything under the uses table,
Yeah. Break. The streets you indicated are fixed. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. If the streets are fixed, there's not room for a park.
Say that again?
For a park. A big central park. The central park that we've always envisioned. So when Ryan says that there is nothing here to constrain a park, it is not true. Now, he doesn't mean to be deceptive about that. He's got green space in his drawing, and it's pretty good sized green space. But it's not the green space that if you lived in Rocky River, you'd say, let's grab the kids and let's go over there and spend the day. I don't see anything like that, which is aspirational. We've talked about from the beginning, we wanted to make this truly unique and special and a true heart of Cleveland Heights. I have nothing opposed to, I'm not at all opposed to the concept of form-based zoning. I am opposed at this moment in time with the biggest decision that we're going to make developmentally in this city for the next 25 years. I am opposed to the word haste. If everybody sitting around this table that's going to be making a decision is confident that they know what constraints this is going to put on development and they're comfortable with them, then you vote. I don't know today. I only know a couple, okay? And I'm concerned about them, and that's why we're having this discussion and many others. But I can guarantee you that given my schedule and given that the holidays are coming and given that my wife is going to send me to the grocery store 8 times for things that she forgot when she was getting ready to make Thanksgiving dinner, I'm not going to have time to get through this in the detail that I would like to get through it so that I can sit across the table here from Eric and the rest of his team who I think are working really hard on this thing. Okay, and I absolutely understand why they want something like form-based zoning here. I just want to make sure we get the right form-based zoning. And that may, as Paul pointed out, require the creation of a development concept to which we want to tailor the form-based zoning. Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Clayton Carubilla from Christ Culture Church, the church right at the entrance to Severance. Found out about the meeting and showed up, so appreciate all the hard work that's going on between the committee here and city council. It's been what a year for Cleveland Heights. So a lot has gone on. I understand the layers of what's happening. So I want to be very specific. We just had a couple of questions, particularly about the code being placed where we're at. And particularly when it comes to CUs, conditional usage, and how that could really affect how and our operations and how we minister. Because conditional usage plus a religious usage can put restrictions on how we do what we do as we continue to develop. And what's interesting, and again, there's many other questions, but I want to be very specific, is when you look at Metro next to us and their charity nonprofit, we're a nonprofit, and both are excluded from an SO3. And so I'm just here to kind of informally ask the committee to consider making charity and religious use permitted in the SO3, since literally over half of the light purple area is exactly that. That makes sense.
So let me just say that churches currently in the balance of our community are conditionally permitted uses.
Correct.
So even now you have a conditional use permit to exist. And that is one of the recommendations actually that the planning commission was making, that churches and charities be conditionally permitted in that SO3. Right. So that change has already been recommended to them. And again, the option with the optional overlay, you can continue operating as you are under the current zoning.
Right.
Or you could decide at some point in time that there's some advantage to opt into the overlay and then decide that you're gonna opt into the severance overlay zone.
Sure. I think that the correct.
Sorry, thank you. I just want to reiterate that. I obviously you and I have met multiple times.
Yeah.
My zoning is only if somebody opts in and decides to change, right? So you are grandfathered in with your existing rights. You can keep operating that way, as Metro can keep operating that way. If you choose to expand, you can either expand under my code, right? Now that we're changing the use to conditional use, or you can expand under the S1, which is also a condition. So none of your rights are being diminished at all.
I think that makes sense on a regular church property in the city. We are not a regular church property. If you look at the buffer zone behind us, if you look at the requirements for entry and exit, at the granular level, we will be affected by these requirements of the roads. There might be an advantage for us to jump into it, but I'm not seeing the advantage of jumping into it.
So the buffer zone currently exists under the S1, and so that would remain a buffer zone if you stay under the S1. So we couldn't be developed under either option. So
I guess what I'm saying is, that's true, but as we develop this area, there will be inspections. There will be things that's required of us. And we are wondering if there's undue burden going to be put on us, not as a requirement of the building or the lot itself, but of roadways, walkability, traffic patterns. We have over 600 people that come to our church, congregants that come to our church. And I think being one of the owners of properties in the Severance circuit, we've never been approached. We've never been talked to. I think Larry's talked to me. I've obviously gotten to know Ryan personally, but we have 1 month to decide whether we have the right input, to be honest with you, and feedback. And so I'm well versed with business. I'm well versed with properties. Eric and I have met once or twice, connected. But I'm concerned that it will affect us. And if it does, or it doesn't, we'd like to know how. That's all. In other words, we'd love the conversation of saying, hey, if you don't opt in, this is how it could affect you. So if Metro opts in and we don't, how will that affect us? If we opt in and Metro doesn't, because we have partnerships with Metro, how will that affect them? So there's different variations of business relationships that are going on here outside of just the zoning code. Now, I understand that you begin with the form-based zoning code, but I disagree with just starting there. So, love SAG and love the work that you guys are doing. We want progress for Severance. Obviously, we believe, and I've shared this with Larry before, I do believe progress is needed, and it's been too long that this has been the case where nothing's going on. But at the same time, I do believe that we need to have conversations of how the different businesses, especially our side is the most used side between Home Depot, between Metro, between our church and the building, the housing across us, the 2 apartments. That is the most used section of the entire property. And so there are requirements, sewer, roads, I mean, the conditions of the roads, we don't want to get to that as part of what's already happening. And, but we really need to know, what are the landscaping requirements that's going to be held? I mean, it is on Easter, we might get to 1,000 people. We're a growing congregation, and we're young, and we're expanding. We're a regional church. Over half of our congregation comes from 44118. And so I just want to make sure that I show up to the meeting and represent religious organizations at this table and say, yeah, we can talk and we can connect, but we need to make sure that there's a seat at the table for religious organizations. Love my Jewish brothers and sisters. They have a seat at the table. Now we want a seat at the table to say, hey, we want to know how things are going to change for us. Again, we might want to opt in. That might be beneficial to us, or we might not. So just hope that's made clear.
Thank you for coming. You wanted to reply?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if it's okay with the chair, that I think we certainly should have an offline discussion. We can walk you through how this may or may not impact you, and then we probably need to have a separate conversation with Ryan to understand.
Well, Ryan's coming from a place of saying, hey, here is the options, and we understand that. But we need a conversation with the city who's going to uphold the development that's going to happen. So once we say yes to this, there's ordinances and building codes that come into play. And we want to make sure that we're not getting conditional use permits when the truth is it should be permitted use. We've been in the community for a long time. We've taken care of that property and that edge. We've contributed to our community. So we want to make sure that we aren't unintentionally having a domino effect here that's going to affect how we do what we do and why we do it. So
We hear you. 100%. And I believe that they will definitely talk with you.
Yeah.
And you're more than welcome to call me at any time as well. Who's here?
Well, I'm from SAG. I just wanted to expand on something that Larry said. In addition to being a destination, SAG, of course, is committed to development. Form-based zoning we think is good. But, this Central Park is so key to what we think is really Cleveland Heights. If this is going to be our village, we need a Central Park. We cannot, the small park spaces behind or, that are in there, there's not enough park space, but we need a big Central Park. The idea would be right in front of City Hall. It'd set off City Hall. It would really bring this city, I think, forward tremendously for our own citizens. Forget Rocky River. The citizens here would love to have this Central Park with a pavilion, with a splash pad, with, things that are really Cleveland Heights-ish like. And that's, I think, SAG is so committed to making sure that this this village within our city is reflective of us. And without a Central Park, it is not reflective of Cleveland Heights. And we could have the high school contest in the high school to do art, to put in the park. There's so many things that a park allows for that help Cleveland Heights and that reflect Cleveland Heights. So that's why we're so adamant about a Central Park.
Thank you. Yes.
I want to follow up on what Paul Volpe had to say, because I have similar sentiments. And I'll do it this way. And this question is to Ryan. If we adopt the form-based zone in the form that it is or will become, what is the likelihood that any developer who comes into the city is going to ask for both a map change and a zoning code change? Because I do agree with Paul's statement, if I heard it correctly, that form-based zoning is nothing more than a nuanced form of Euclidean zoning. I understand its flexibility. I've done a lot of zoning work. But in all of the situations I've been involved, the developer has come in and asked for a map change and a zoning variance, or in this case, the technical committee will go to the planning commission, so I understand it. And that would be the process. So I don't know who's best to answer, but I assume Ryan would be.
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you that I've done 4 of these in the last 10 years, and not one community has had that issue. So that's the evidence that I have. And I think that the whole purpose of this is to create the proper amount of flexibility and to put the zoning in a position where people understand that adherence to it and the challenges with making sure you don't have to ask for variance are worth it, because the process and the expedited approval process and tying it into what we hope to be an NCA CRA tax payment situation that needs to get set up next year, which nothing gets built without that, Frank, is essential. And I think, listen, I respect everybody. This is, we have slightly different opinions. I don't think we're really far apart at all. But I have to say that, in the end, I am proposing a process that is different from the past. Sure. That's what I'm proposing, right? In the past, a developer comes in, they create some pictures and a specific plan, right? Usually it's not for something this large, but sometimes it is, right? And then zoning is baked around that plan and is very fixed in nature, right? And that is the traditional development methodology. I'm proposing a totally different process, right? To be clear, of a zoning framework that creates place, and each individual project will come in and have to adhere to that framework. If we had every developer lined up today with checks in hands, ready to, design their buildings for the next 15 years of this site, right? 50 acres of development and all this stuff that's going to happen, even under SAG's plan, right? If we had all those developers lined up, we could go that path, right? That doesn't exist today. It's obviously kind of challenging to get people to develop on this site, right? Otherwise it would have been developed already. And this is something that's very successful for me. I encourage you to check out the places that we've worked, right? Go look at the city of New Rochelle. They're literally in their best fiscal position in the last 100 years. That city is renowned nationwide for one of the most incredible revitalizations that this country has ever seen. And that is literally due to this form-based zone. So, the proof is in the pudding for what I've done in the past. And I think this is the route to go, albeit I totally respect the old route. I just think that old route is the way it's been done in the past, will take much longer to actually get investors if they ever come.
We have another question for you.
All right, so as a longtime resident, for many years, I have been trying to get people to understand that the wooded area is not a bunch of trees. It is an ecosystem that is the headwaters of Dugway Brook, which is the one branch of Dugway Brook, which is the major waterway underlying most of Cleveland Heights. Fragmenting that area with new roads, new walkways, or anything else is very much counter to developing the health of what should be an improvement to our environment. This is where our oxygen comes from. This is where our water comes from. This is instrumental to the safety and quality of life of the existing neighborhoods represented by Crest Road and Severn Road. It is not just a bunch of trees, and the attitude that it is, and the attitude that new walkways and new roads can just be drawn through it, as shown on these maps, raises a lot of concern and alarm amongst everyone I know. And I don't know who you've talked to about the Milliken School, because I have led people for many years in opposition to turning that into a housing development. So there is a lot left to be discussed here before we could say, well, we are accepting a map which clearly shows the intention to put in a whole new network of streets adjacent to or intruding into the wooded area. We need a more consolidated view of what this woodlands area actually is, because it is already fragmented across many property owners, but it should be something that we can coordinate as a major part of Cleveland Heights. This is a continuous route from South Taylor up to the Milliken School area, and from Milliken School up to Mayfield Road. And the very peak of this headwaters is the playground at Milliken School. This needs to be understood as part of how we understand our community and what we're doing with Severn.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Maybe just, caboosing onto your remarks. I'm a resident, longtime resident of Crest Road, and just completely, I will say, next to ignorant of the entire process. So I apologize. A lot of things that I'm asking about have been already discussed. But what I'm hearing, what I heard from I'm very, very confused. The whole process of looking at this overlay and voting on it seems to me to have been done really without real public participation or comment. What I heard today was that the current S1 zoning allows for potential development of the buffer zone. Is that correct?
No.
No, it doesn't. Okay, but the overlay might or does allow for, so the buffer zone is not being imperiled or touched at all. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. And there is a proposal with the overlay to have new road access that does or doesn't go through the buffer zone. No. So it is being maintained and protected. Okay, thank you.
I just want to be clear. The recommendation is that this zoning would allow for the improvement of the existing connections that are pedestrian bike only, right? And right of ways that exist from Crest and from Saw. So it would be, if somebody wanted to improve those, they could design them to this perspective. I like, again, we can remove those, but literally it's just intended to improve. And I hear the conversation about the wetlands and the headwaters, and I did some research on that. I'm by no means an expert on it. I spoke with, I forget the gentleman's name, we did a bunch of videos on it, on the Dugway Brook, and I tried to learn about it. Eric and I have been talking actually about the fact that, can we reconstitute some of the water that existed on the front area on Mayfield Road where that wooded area is. That's currently NAMDAR-owned property, and I'd like to do a land swap to give that back to the city. We talked about, there was a bridge in there, so I'm super sensitive to all this stuff. And the intention and what we've designed, I believe, doesn't impair any of that at all. So
out of the specificity of the buffer zone, I agree with, I'm sorry, the gentleman from SAG's comments, earlier comments, you know, I mean.
Mr. Volpe?
Mr. Volpe.
Mr. Volpe?
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, I agree with you.
Please.
I agree with your comments, you know, like it seems to me if this overlay does specify sort of a street structure that is really that to me would represent the skeleton of the development plan. And it doesn't, you know, I think, you know, rushing into a vote about what that should look like those streets really are going to predict the kind of development that occurs, particularly in the circle. And it just seems like, you know, again, this is from a point of a position of relative ignorance, but I'm just trying to understand what the implications are here. It doesn't feel like we should be voting on this right now. There's so much more to be discovered, to be explored, and that's all I'm saying.
All right. Yes, sir.
So it's a perfect segue to my comments. I agree with some of the concerns of my fellow SAG members. I have two issues about the planning process. The first is the timetable. And I understand you have a time-sensitive agreement with NAMDAR, so I appreciate that. But I can't imagine picking a worse time period to approve this plan by December 15th in the midst of all the holidays. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be paying a whole lot of attention, unfortunately, to severance and the results of the Planning Commission or City Council vote. Secondly, given all the problems the city has gone through the last year or so, seems to me that we have this once in a lifetime chance for the redevelopment, as you're well aware. Seems to me, even though a majority of the city council, including the interim mayor and the mayor-elect, are still going to be there after January 1st, to me, it seems to me there should be approval of this for a new era for Cleveland Heights after we have a new government in place, not at the very end of our current administration, even though, as Craig and Gail will still be there. It's not just that it's going to make a big difference in that sense between December 15th and January 2nd, but it seems to me we should have a somewhat more extended public process for people to understand what this is, in addition to the meetings that are already scheduled, but have a approval process implemented by the new government, not the lame duck government that we have. That's nothing to do with the issues about form-based zoning or anything else. It's about the process.
Mr. Byrne.
Hi, thanks. You know, as a voting member of the Planning Commission, I'm not going to make any recommendations now because I think that would be outside of my role, because I will do that at the Planning Commission meeting. I do have a question though. Since there is no developer proposal right now, you know, we have some concept plans. Does it make sense to be adopting zoning that relates to this plan that shows where streets go and where buildings go before we have anyone proposing to build anything, as opposed to maybe the more traditional route saying we're going to add design and development guidelines to this site. And then when a proposal comes in, the Planning Commission, you know, the Architectural Review Board will apply those design and development guidelines in reviewing the proposal that comes in. So I guess the question is this plan that you're showing in effect locking in things that are premature because we don't have a developer proposal yet? I hope I'm clear on that. And again, I'm not expressing a preference, I'm just asking a question.
Brian, or who's that go to?
Not a staff answer. My answer is no. It's doing exactly what you asked for, which is creating design guidelines that any developer that comes in, whether they want to develop an office building or a hotel, have to adhere to it.
Well, I guess I don't see that plan as design guideline because it actually shows where buildings go and where streets go. That's much more specific than design
It doesn't show where
guidelines.
buildings go. It shows just the street networks and the blocks. So it does not show where buildings go. And it shows, and there's requirements for each one of those blocks. And there's plenty of blocks, by the way, there that are very large in nature that could be parks. There's nothing restricted. So I don't.
We'll continue to debate this one, Brian.
I'll just,
I said we'll continue to debate this one.
I'll just
When the blocks are big enough.
I mean, I'm just speaking facts as to what the code says. I don't,
Me too.
And, you have staff and you have legal counsel.
Eric,
I just wanted to add the trend has been going towards form-based zoning throughout the country for the reasons, part of many of the reasons that Karen read and Brian mentioned, which is the traditional way, which is having that developer come in with a plan. We've experienced that here, where we've had developers walk in with plans that were not good for the community. And guess what? Often they were compliant with zoning. So it was only because of a laborious process that we got to an end result that everybody was satisfied. This tries to streamline that to make sure that those decisions are made up front through the design guidelines.
Is there any more questions? Yes.
Just for a point of information, when I look at the map and there are blocks with numbers, and I looked through the plan to try to find out where there was any other description of what the significance is of the size of the blocks, or, is there some specification somewhere else in this document of what's in what's in block 5 versus block 6, or is the numbering just a convenient way to refer to one block or another with no specificity as to what happens in this block?
Yeah, no, so the SO1, 2, or 3 districts is what does the regulations. The blocks are just for convenience of, where you sit on the site, right? So you can say I'm in block 3 and we know that that's in either SO2 or SO1, right? So that's the purpose of the blocks, for an applicant to come in and say, this is where I am. Yeah, and then again, I just want to be clear, the street networks were set up.
No.
The question was raised about the cost of infrastructure, right? I think Councilman Cobb and then someone else from SAG reiterated, right? Infrastructure is going to be expensive here, right? Redoing Severn Circle to make it a great place that people want to walk around and be, it's going to be an expensive proposition. Building these new roads, making sure all this stuff works is going to be to figure out how to pay for, which is literally the next step of this process, right? Through the NCA CRA TIF process, right? That being said, we set these streets up so that they sit within the existing infrastructure of the site. So the sewers and the water lines and the drainage and all that stuff largely sits underneath our proposed roadway network, so that doesn't have to be relocated in a process where these new streets are designed and built, right? Things are repaired, fine, but you're not moving an entire drainage system or an entire water line, right? Just going to make this a lot more feasible, right? So that we can use it for parks money, more money for parks than for relocating a street network when it's not necessary, because it creates pretty good development blocks, right?
Thank you, Ryan. I'm just gonna say, I really like development and interested in development. So when I look at maps like this, to me, most people are visual, and with the technology that they have nowadays, I don't understand why maps like this can't be in 3D. Forgive me, like HGTV, where people can actually design a home on a computer, put furniture in it, and give a person a visual of what the house would look like before they move in it. And I think a lot of times this is missing on maps, because if people could actually visualize if a S3 or S1 had a potential of what could actually be there, and you could actually see it in a 3D form and the size of the parks and the visual, I think people in general would get a better understanding of what they're looking at. But when they're looking at blocks and colors and nothing there, it's hard to visualize what the concept of the vision is, unless you actually see it in some type of real-time or 3D form. And I don't know if you can do that. I think that would be very helpful to a lot of people as far as visualizing what Severance, what the plan is and how big the park space is, what could actually go there, a hotel, if it's 5 stories or 2 stories, at least there's something there where people can actually visualize parking lots where the streets are paved and lined, where cars are actually sitting there, more of a visual of it. I think people will have a tendency to have a better perception of what you're talking about or what they want, because it's easier to see. And I don't know if you can do that. I'm quite sure there's some kind of capabilities out there because HGTV do it. I've seen Paul Volpe do it.
We do it.
And I'm thinking if we could, if you could provide a map with something to that type of scale, maybe that would be helpful. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the challenge is that's much more akin to the traditional process where someone's showing you a rendering and a building name. Right? So this is not that. This is there's framework of how high someone's building can go. The street frontage has to be a certain way. First floor has to be a certain way. All those requirements exist, but I'm not proposing a building today, right? So my concern would be is I do a rendering and put together a building on a map, and then everybody's like, oh, that's what they're building, right? And that's not necessarily exactly what's going to get built, right? We could give you form examples of buildings that have been built that sit within these parameters that we've required. That we can definitely do, right? We can say, these are examples of things that would fit this zone, max things, min things, those types of things.
That's basically what I'm talking about, and showing where a park would be, the green space would be, the visual piece of it. I think it would be helpful.
Well, sorry, Councilwoman Russell, I just want to be 100% clear. I don't want to walk away from this with any confusion.
No, I know,
right?
I understand that whatever you put on that block does not mean it's going to be built there.
But I don't even know that putting it on a block makes any sense, right?
Okay.
If you look at block 8, right, which I think is going to be a first mover, right? Block 8 is a very large block, right? It can hold a lot of different buildings on it, right? It's the entire parking lot in front of the movie theater, right? Area, or excuse me, the gym area, right? And that area. I don't know that again, I did a conceptual plan, right? You've seen that. I showed that on the slide. That is very real world, 60-foot deep buildings, double loaded corridors, parking hidden in the middle. I think there was a lot of conversation or mention about surface parking. All the parking is hidden, so you would never see it unless you're parking there for your building, right? I want to be 100% clear. That's required by the zoning, okay? I could see myself giving examples of this is the max and min of what can be built under the code that would meet the zoning requirements from a look and feel for each one of the districts. That's the kind of thing, but placing it on the site gives kind of a false perception of where anything may or may not go, right?
Okay, well, I just wanted to make that suggestion, and I understand. But I'm going to have to conclude this meeting so I can run to go back to work. But I've enjoyed the conversation. If we need to have another Planning and Development Committee meeting to have any more discussion, that will be up to our Council President to decide if I need to have another one or not, and to move the conversation a little bit more forward, to have a little more detail or more questions that people may ask before the December 10th meeting. Just let me know, and I'm happy to do so. Yes.
Were you planning on scheduling a meeting of this committee in December?
I was planning to have something, yes, because I wanted to finish up with the Taylor and Noble merchants.
So perhaps we can keep this as a spaceholder for reconvening this committee.
Okay, that'd be fine.
Is there a date for that, a tentative date?
I had not put it together just yet. We just had one to.
When you have it, if you could let us know.
Yes.
Larry or myself, any of us on SAG.
Yes.
So we might be able to come prepared with some more detailed information to help you better understand our considerations.
Yes, I think that's what Ryan is looking for, and what Karen Caniddle said at the beginning.
Okay.
They would really like specific comments, so that if it could be worked in or not worked in, or if it's just not a goal, period, that at least Ryan and the city has a direction.
And I just want to put out there, I am available, right? So, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Tim. Like, we talked 2 weeks ago for an hour. I asked Larry to schedule another thing. If you guys want to get ahead of that meeting for these meetings with me, I will literally walk you through every line of that code if I need to, right? So, that goes for everybody in this room. So, gentlemen from Citizen Press, I apologize. We had a lot of meetings. Missed you. We inevitably miss people in a 40-something thousand person city, right? I 100% would be, if you can get your information to Karen or to Eric, I'm happy to contact you immediately and we can set something up one-on-one. The Dugway Brook stuff. I mean, everybody, I appreciate you coming out because I do want this to be a process that we work on together. I have very real deadlines, and I'm willing to work my butt off to make sure everybody is as satisfied as possible.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and I will make sure everybody knows of the next meeting. It will be definitely before the 10th, before the public hearing.
15.
The 15th, public hearing before that. Yes, definitely. And I will make sure everybody knows so we can all come back here. Is that good with everyone? Yes? Yes? Okay.
Glenn, I'll call you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, this meeting is now adjourned, so.